Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Shaw Auditorium and the regular council meeting for Monday, October 28th, starting at 7 p.m. And we'll start off by calling the meeting to order and ask for any late items. Ms. King.
Thank you, Your Worship. We are adding a delegation for Mr. Fred Taylor to item 8A, which is general amendments to zoning bylaw 4500. We're adding a delegation for Mr. Brendan Kennedy, the CEO from Laffitte Ventures Ltd, to item 8F, which is a rezoning application at 1100 Mon Road. We are adding an item of correspondence and building inspection photos to item 8H, which is a report related to 236-240 Halliburton Street. And we're adding a delegation for Mr. Ron Boland to item 11A, which is consideration of the property tax exemption bylaw. That's it for the late items, Your Worship.
Thank you. So could we ask for a motion for the adoption of the agenda as amended?
So moved, Your
Moving
Worship.
second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And moving right into the motion for the adoption of the minutes. A and B? So moved. Moved. Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And we'll move now into the presentations, 5A, and the first presenter, Mr. David Whitty, Chair of the South Downtown Waterfront Committee, to provide a presentation regarding the South Downtown Waterfront Initiative. Dr. Whitty, welcome, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I'd like to, first of all, before I begin, I am chair of the South Downtown Waterfront Initiative, and I'd like to, before I begin, thank a couple of your staff members who have been exceedingly helpful to the committee, and I know on behalf of the committee would like me to acknowledge them publicly. It's Chris Jackson and Rebecca Tubbs.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
What I'm going to do tonight is very quickly run through where we're at, because I know you've got a full agenda. There it was well before I think most of us were here. So what's the purpose of the South Downtown Waterfront Initiative? First of all, we've been tasked to provide guidance and leadership in the development of a long-term vision and guiding principles for the study area. And the one thing that we need to be aware of is we're not creating a regulatory document, nor are we creating a detailed plan. The committee will, however, submit a long-term vision and guiding principles for the study area. So that really is our focus and the focus of our work to date. We are, in fact, a committee of partners and members of the public, and really proven out to be a good working group, good representation as well. So we have the Downtown Nanaimo Business Improvement Association, represented by Darren Moss. We have the Nanaimo Advisory Planning Committee in the City of Nanaimo, represented by your own Councillor Patchy. We have the Nanaimo Economic Development Corporation as well, Sasha Angus. The Nanaimo Port Authority, Mike Davidson. I put down Bernie as well because they alternate in terms of membership and attendance. They're not both there at the same time, but just to acknowledge that we've had both of them attend. The Regional District of Nanaimo, Dennis Trudeau. South End Community Association, Douglas Hardy. Myself, Chair representing VIU, Community at Large, and Sheriff, and Community at Large, Doug Kelsix, who's also the Vice Chair. So a good cross-section. Yeah. Unfortunately, the red line isn't showing up there very well. I don't know if you can see it, but basically, study area is approximately 59 hectares or 150 acres, and with the Wellcox property encompassing 27 acres or 11 hectares of the study area. As you can see, it runs to the north up into the, so what you're looking at down here. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to step here if I may. And let's see if this works. So I'm doing this for council. So just, here's BC Ferries, study area here, Front Street, Esplanade, and then down to the south part of the waterfront area next to Sinimic First Nation territory. This is an image of the study area and the owners and tenants. So there's quite a mix of owners and tenants. Parcel study area itself is broken up significantly. It makes for some interesting challenges, but in fact, there's nothing like some good challenges to draw attention to a study area and to the process for the committee. So we're paying particular attention to this this variety of landowners and stakeholders, and in fact have to a large extent met with most of them, and they've done presentations to the committee. I think you can perhaps see best there, but the largest is the Port Authority, as you would well know, and then we've got ownership under a number of other landowners, including the city towards the north end of the property, that Wilcox property. But again, within that, there's fragmented leases that add a multiplicity of overlayers to any resolution. So to state the obvious, it's not straightforward. But nevertheless, in that, I think, creates some interesting opportunities. So one of the things that we did early on was put in place framing principles. And we did that because we thought it was important to for everyone to have a sense of where the committee's at in terms of its work on the waterfront. So what we're really saying is that we believe that connection, cultural, social, and environment are really quite important in some of the key framing principles. And I'm not sure if you can read that, nor can those in the audience, so I'm going to read this for you. So under connection, what are we talking about? The committee believes that we're looking at creating a regional gateway that is both accessible and multimodal and encourages connectivity among land, sea, residential, industrial, and commercial activities in a sustainable coexistence. In terms of an environment, what we've identified is this: to respect, steward, and enhance the waterfront environment while ensuring adaptability to climate change and its effects. Under economic, to maintain the concept of a working harbor and encourage development of strategic economic infrastructure. And then under cultural and social, to create public waterfront access and engaging public spaces that celebrate the heritage of the site, strengthening the relationship between South Downtown waterfront activities and the community. So these framing principles were crafted through a workshop session in the committee to really keep us focused on where we wanted to concentrate our energies and attention. So what's the progress to date? Again, I'm giving you a quick overview tonight. We've had 9 committee meetings so far. Those are open to the public, by the way. We've retained consultants, City Spaces, for the pre- and post-charrette work, and to help us during the charrette as well. We've retained HBL Golder for the charrette itself. We've had presentations from the stakeholders, the ones that I showed you in terms of the ownership and leasing. Committee's gone to the harbor. We've actually had a water visit, thanks to the Port Authority, and also an on-site visit. And then we had a harbor fair a couple of weeks ago now, where we had over 300 people, and we had a bus tour, and over 100 people, about 120, did the bus tour, which in fact went through the site. We were able to access areas normally wouldn't be accessed there. We had really good cooperation from C-SPAN and others. We also had displays from some of our partners and others, and then we undertook surveys, and I'll summarize those in a minute. The other thing that we've done is, and if you've seen in the paper, and we have an invitation for further community participation that we put public. We have a very active website, and certainly worth going into. It's simple to get at. South Downtown Waterfront Initiative. Lots of activity in that site. It's a good site. It's got lots of information on it. All the minutes of the meetings are posted, and as much information as we have as a committee is on the site. There's some images from the Harbor Fair. The upper right is actually an ideas board that people were able to put up little posties with what they thought was important from their perspective. The lower right is the survey, where people filled out surveys, and then in behind we had some community activity and munchies and the like. Lower left is some of the community displays and participation opportunities. and then the welcome to Nanaimo itself. And there's a councillor there, I think.
For Patchy. Councillor Patchy?
Is that who that is? I think it is. So what did we hear at the Harbour Fair, just to give you a sense of the feedback to date? So 77 respondents filled out surveys. I'm just giving you a real quick snippet here, but what are the key things that we heard in the written survey? And there were some other aspects to it, I'm just giving you a highlight. Increased public access was something people wanted. Walking bicycle paths they thought was important. Maintain a working harbour. Parks, open space, and transportation hub. That's in the order of the top five. And then ideas board. You saw that picture of people putting their ideas up. One category had was my working harbour. What do they think about should happen in a working harbour? They thought there should be public access, public space, walking and cycling, fast ferry, and transit hub. And then under another category, my waterfront, we asked people, what would you like to see there? Walking and cycling, parks, open space, arts, culture, heritage, and transit hub. So there are some common themes here that are helpful for us as we enter the charrette. So the upcoming events then, here in this facility, we have Dr. Larry Beasley speaking here, November 12th, 7 p.m. We have an ideas forum here as well in VICC. And on the 13th, that's starting at 7 as well. And then the charrette, which is over a 3-day process and involves just over 40 people. And a goodly number of citizens who have been nominated to participate in that and have a selection process to help us. Carol Matthews is actually someone who's helping us with that. So that's where we're headed.
Sorry, Dr. Whitty, are those three all open to the public as well?
Yeah, everything. Yeah, except that. Well, the charrette is where everybody's burrowed down, working. So you can get really distracted if you have lots of people kind of coming in and say, "Well, what's that mean?" Charrettes tend to be, unfortunately, meant to be focused on activity. Hence, we've asked and have had a goodly number of people nominated to represent citizens. So that gives the community, through those individuals, an opportunity to participate in the charrette as well.
Thank you.
In terms of final reporting then, we anticipate a final report submitted mid to late December. And in that then will be a record of the process, the products we've developed, particularly the vision and guiding principles. That's my presentation, Mr. Mayor.
Well, thank you very much. I just do want to thank you and the entire committee for an incredible amount of very hard work. It's a very complicated plan that is being unfolded here, and I know you and the staff and the council is represented by Councillor Patchy on this one, and I know a huge amount of time has not only has been spent, but I think going forward, I'm sorry, but there'll be a lot more time, I'm guessing, too. But you're getting some very positive results, and I appreciate all the time you put into it personally, and certainly everyone on your committee. First question I have is Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Dr. Whitty. Also, thank you for seeking out Chris Jackson and Rebecca Tubbs. I have noticed firsthand how amazing their work is, and without it, the committee wouldn't function. I wonder if you could explain a little bit further on the next public input, that being the Ideas Workshop, and what that entails, and what people do to partake in that. Sure.
So the Ideas Forum is meant to be an interactive process, and it fits nicely between Dr. Beasley's presentation and he's done work around the globe, and so he'll give us some stimulating ideas. At the Ideas Forum, one of the things I should be clear on, that there's a newspaper article on the weekend, and I thought it was a good article, except mentioned that for the Ideas Forum it was by registration only, and in fact we'd like people to register just so we have how many people might be there, but people can come without registering. Just want to be clear on that. We'll put another notice out to clarify that as well. So at the Ideas Forum, we have a facilitator who will work with us, and Dr. Pam Shaw, and she will help facilitate that. And the idea is that she uses a technique called World Cafe, and that allows for people to have some really rich, deep conversations and share those ideas with everybody and there. And so we're looking for the ideas from that forum will inform the charrette. Now, that's on the Wednesday. You're going to say, well, the charrette's on a Thursday. How are you going to do that? The charrette, as it turns, is actually starts at 5 o'clock. So Pam and I will be very busy with she's bringing students with her to be at each table to summarize that material and capsulize it, and I'll be presenting that to the Charette on the Thursday evening. So it is important. If people saw the Daily News, the article, they know where I stand on consultation. It's a really, really important part of this process, and so we welcome the public to come and participate and share their ideas, because they've got lots of ideas and we want to hear them.
Well, thank you, Dr. Whitty. I don't see any further questions from the council at this point, and I'm just wondering, I hope that we'll hear from you again in the not too far distant future, that when time allows. I realize it's a huge time commitment for you, and I do appreciate again what you've done, and we're certainly looking forward to hearing from you. Not any more than I think it's a very valuable piece of land, 27 acres, and it has some huge complications with right-of-ways and road allowances and all the other issues of the two. So thank you again, and thank you to your entire staff. Then appreciate it. Yes, sir. The next presentation is 5B, Mr. Brian Patterson, Urban Systems, and Mr. Gordon Foy, Traffic and Transportation Planning Engineer, to provide a presentation update on the Transportation Master Plan. And I think at this point we'll have our Councillor Anderson, if you would like to introduce the group, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our staff and everyone who's watching at home. As many people know, we've been moving down a process of adopting a transportation master plan that will guide the transportation decisions in the city for the next 25 years. And as council knows, this process has been going on for about 2 years now, and I do want to thank my colleagues on council who are part of the committee, Councillor Bill McKay and Councillor Ted Greaves, and the other members of the committee, and also the staff as well. So currently the Transportation Master Plan is focusing on promoting alternative modes of transportation, so focusing on pedestrians, transit services, cycling, and actually putting the use of cars as being the last aspect. And so I think we're trying to move to a more sustainable community, and I think we see that through our official community plan of promoting alternative modes of transportation and creating a livable and walkable community. So I would invite Mr. Foy and Mr. Patterson to begin the presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We are here tonight to give you an update on the Nanaimo Transportation Master Plan. We're moving forward into another important phase of the plan. We've done issues and opportunities, and we've set our vision, goals, and objectives, and now we're moving forward with our discussion paper number 3, transportation possibilities. So we're here tonight to provide you an update on that process, and we're here to also initiate our next phase of public consultation over the next 2 to 3 weeks. So I'm going to pass the presentation over to Brian. He's right behind me. And we're going to ask that you maybe hold your questions until the end of the presentation if possible. But we'll both be available at the end of the presentation to answer your questions as you wish.
Thank you.
So, Brian, here you go.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship, members of Council. So as Gord mentioned, we'll be presenting an update on where we're at in terms of the Transportation Master Plan process. So I'll start by providing an update of the study process. I'll provide an update on the visioning directions, which really set the course for the Transportation Master Plan in terms of where we want to go and outlining a vision for the transportation network in Nanaimo over the next 25 years and beyond, as well as supporting goals, objectives, and targets. And these were developed several months ago as part of our second discussion paper through the process. What we've been focusing on over the past several months is on the policies and actions, part 3 of the agenda item here. So this is looking at, with the vision, goals, targets in place, how are we going to get there, and what sort of policies, actions, and initiatives should we be focusing on to meet those goals and objectives. So I'll walk through each of those elements and then talk about next steps as well. So in terms of the study update, as you know, we've been working on this process for just over a year now. We launched the process back in the fall of 2012 with our first 2 phases, which were called launching and discovering. And at this point in the process, we were really trying to understand the existing transportation conditions, issues, and opportunities in Nanaimo. and worked with the public and the stakeholders and a number of committees to identify and understand what those issues were. And the results of that were our first discussion paper, Existing Conditions, which summarized the existing transportation issues and opportunities for Nanaimo. We moved into phase 3 in the spring and summer of 2013, which looked at the vision, goals, objectives, and targets for the Nanaimo Transportation Master Plan. And this was really building on the existing policy context you have in place with your official community plan, the strategic plan, as well as other documents, the regional growth strategy, and so forth, and making sure that the visioning direction that we developed for this process was consistent and aligned with those other overarching visioning documents. But the Transportation Master Plan allows us to go a little bit deeper into some of those areas and provide more specifics in terms of directions and build upon those directions. So we developed the second discussion paper in the summer, which summarized our vision, goals, objectives, and targets for the Transportation Master Plan, and I'll summarize those shortly. Right now, we're at a stage in the process, it's a pivotal point in the process, where we've outlined some potential transportation possibilities, and these are outlined in our third discussion paper, which will be coming out this week. And we're looking for consultation from the public and from stakeholders to understand their thoughts on these preliminary transportation possibilities. And that's what we'll be presenting tonight, and some key elements of our transportation possibilities. Based on what we hear from the public and from stakeholders and others in the coming month, we'll be putting together a summary of our consultation results, meeting with our Transportation Advisory Committee again, and preparing a draft and final transportation master plan later on this winter for your consideration and ultimately your approval. So what have we done so far in terms of communications and consultation? We've had a number of engagement opportunities with a variety of different groups, including yourselves with 2 council meetings to provide updates to council throughout the course of the study. We've had 2 stakeholder workshops to date, the first of which in November 2012 was part of the existing conditions phase to understand issues and opportunities. And then we had a second workshop in May 2013 to really chart the course and understand and develop a vision, goals, and targets for the Transportation Master Plan. We've had some open houses and a public survey as well back in the fall of 2012, and we'll be doing that another round of consultation in the coming month. And we've been working on an ongoing basis with both a technical working group, which is made up of departments from the city, various departments of city staff, as well as external agencies. And we've also been working closely and receiving guidance from the Transportation Advisory Committee of Council on an ongoing basis, and we'll continue to do so. So we've heard a number of issues, opportunities, and input from a variety of different stakeholder groups, ranging from community groups, neighborhood associations, and other types of community associations, from transportation agencies, from various levels of government. And many of these groups have participated in our stakeholder workshops. We've also received a wealth of information from the broader public through our online survey, open houses, and website that's been available. So in terms of next steps for the consultation, as I mentioned, we're launching our next round of consultation following this meeting. So this will involve another stakeholder workshop on November 5th, as well as a round of open houses and an online survey that will launch over the coming week and will be available throughout November. Based on what we hear, we'll be summarizing our findings to date. We'll have another meeting with the Transportation Advisory Committee, and then we'll summarize the input, prepare a draft and final plan, and bring that back to Council for your consideration at that point in time later this fall. So in terms of the visioning directions for the plan, as I mentioned, a number of considerations were taken into place when we were developing our vision and goals and targets for the plan. And at the highest level, we wanted to make sure they were consistent and built upon your policy framework already, and were consistent with the official community plan, the strategic plan, as well as the regional growth strategy and BC Transit Future Plan, which is taking place in parallel with this process. So we took all those documents into consideration as we developed our visioning directions, but also we took into account what we heard from the public and from stakeholders through the process. So the vision that we've developed for the Transportation Master Plan includes 3 themes. The first theme is really focusing on moving towards a more multimodal transportation system that emphasizes walking, cycling, and transit, as well as the private vehicle, to connect city residents and businesses to each other, and also to connect to the rest of Vancouver Island and beyond. The second theme of the vision focuses on providing inclusive transportation choices for people of all ages and abilities, and recognizing, again, with an increase in the number of seniors and an aging population in Nanaimo, it's very important to focus on seniors, people with disabilities, and creating a universally accessible transportation system. And then thirdly, looking at providing an interconnected transportation system, looking at interconnected facilities and services which will provide affordable mobility options while supporting a shift towards a more sustainable mix of transportation alternatives, namely walking, cycling, and transit. So in support of this vision, our second discussion paper identified goals and targets for the future of transportation in Nanaimo. This graph here shows how transportation patterns are currently made throughout the city. Currently, the majority of trips are made by private vehicle in Nanaimo. About 88% of daily trips are made by automobile, and about 12% of daily trips are made by the more sustainable modes of transportation, walking, cycling, and transit, with walking accounting for the vast majority of those, about 8% of daily trips. So through the Transportation Master Plan, we have set targets for increasing that mode share for walking and cycling and transit, recognizing the increase in growth in traffic that will occur in the future. So currently, there's about 250,000 daily trips made within the city per day. And from our transportation modeling, we know that that will increase by about 50% to 375,000 trips per day in 2041. So we are proposing a significant increase in the mode share for walking, cycling, and transit from 12% today and doubling that to 24% in the future. And what that actually means is a significant increase in the number of walking and cycling and transit trips, but it also represents a significant increase in the number of vehicle trips by about 30% throughout the city. So even though the mode share for walking and cycling and transit increases, we still need to recognize and provide for transportation options for all modes of transportation, including vehicles. It's an ambitious target, and it's a bold target, and quite a change in direction for the city. Over the past 15 years, your mode share has remained relatively stagnant around 12 or 13% for walking, cycling, and transit. So a shift to double that to 24% is very ambitious, but we feel it's achievable. And we feel it's achievable because we've looked at a number of other similar-sized communities around North America and looked at some of their mode shares. A couple of examples here are shown on this chart here, and I'd point your attention perhaps to Bellingham, Washington, a similar-sized community and a lot of similar characteristics to Nanaimo, which currently has a mode share of 18% for walking, cycling, and transit. And there's a number of other similar-sized communities here. Kelowna, for example, has an existing mode share of 14% for walking, cycling, and transit, including a current mode share of 4% for cycling, so showing that it is possible to achieve mode shares of that magnitude for cycling. And then Kamloops is another example where they see a 5% mode share currently for transit, which is double your current mode share for transit. So there are possibilities, and we want to look to these other communities to find out how they've achieved these targets and build off their successes. So as I mentioned, even though the increase in the percentage of walking and cycling and transit trips is significant, it does represent an increase in the number of trips made by all modes of transportation. And when we're looking at the future number of trips, 375,000 trips per day, that's an extra 125,000 trips made throughout the city. And through these targets, that actually means 65,000 new trips will be made by vehicle, and 60,000 new trips will be made by walking, cycling, or transit. So even the private vehicle still will account for the majority of new trips within the city with these targets. So we need to plan for that through the Transportation Master Plan and providing strategies to significantly encourage walking, cycling, and transit, but also to accommodate private vehicles. So some of the policies and actions that we've developed, this is focusing on how do we achieve the vision and these targets that I was just presenting. And this is what is highlighted in our third discussion paper. And there's quite a lot of information in this discussion paper. We'll focus on some of the key highlights for each of these topic areas. So within the Transportation Master Plan, in this third discussion paper, there's 8 key elements. One of the overarching themes is really looking at land use and emphasizing the need to integrate land use and transportation planning in your decision-making, and recognizing that land use is perhaps the most important factor that influences how people travel through the city. We have themes focusing on the sustainable modes of transportation, walking, cycling, and transit. Themes focusing on major roads as well as neighborhood transportation, and then finally looking at parking and strategic connections. So it's a multimodal transportation plan that's really looking at a variety of different topic areas and ultimately intended to provide an integrated multimodal transportation system. In terms of the plan framework, again, we focused on the second discussion paper on what we want to achieve and outlined a vision for the future of the overall transportation system. And for each of these 8 topic areas, we outlined what we call the strategic direction, which is really a sentence that outlines in succinct terms what we see as the future of that topic for walking or cycling or otherwise. We identified a number of goals for each topic area, and those were all outlined in the second discussion paper. Today, in the third discussion paper, we're really focusing on the policies and actions. How will we achieve those strategic directions and goals for each mode? So I'll talk now about each of the 8 specific topic areas in the plan. And the first is focusing on land use. As I mentioned, land use really is one of the most fundamental aspects of how people get around the city. It's equally, if not more important than the transportation system in influencing how people travel around their community. So the plan really emphasizes the importance of land use, and especially when we know the magnitude of population growth in the city. There will be another nearly 40,000 residents in the city of Nanaimo over the next 30 years, so we need to plan to accommodate those residents in the most effective way for the transportation system. So what the Transportation Master Plan proposes is a network of what we're calling mobility hubs, and this builds on the notion in the official community plan, which supports concentrating growth in urban nodes and along corridors. So we're really building on that direction in your OCP to provide increased densities, mixtures of land uses, and destinations within a network of these 7 mobility hubs throughout the city. And this really lays the foundation for the plan. What we're hoping that would be achieved in these areas is creating an environment within each of these mobility hubs that are more pedestrian-friendly and bicycle-friendly, and that encourage shorter trips within the mobility hubs. But it's also a network of mobility hubs. So even though we want to promote walking and cycling within each of these orange and yellow areas, the plan also focuses at strengthening and improving connections between mobility hubs for transit and for the road network in particular. The next theme focuses on walking, and really the overarching goal for walking is to get more people walking and to get them walking more places. The Transportation Master Plan identifies a number of strategies to improve walking conditions and to get more people walking by focusing on areas where we think there's highest potential and highest demand for walking, and focusing strategically on investments in pedestrian facilities. And so this is focusing investments primarily within these mobility hubs that I showed on the previous slide there, as well as other major activity areas throughout the city where we think there would be a lot of people walking, and really prioritizing improvements in those areas as well as schools and other commercial areas throughout the city. And this can be a range of treatments ranging from ensuring that sidewalks are provided in those activity areas, but also looking at some urban design features and what else can we do to create a really great pedestrian realm and encourage people to walk. And this can include some of the examples on the images here: street lighting, street trees and landscaped boulevards, public art, weather protection, good lighting, and a number of other elements are recommended in the plan to really create great places in these high activity areas. The plan also has recommendations for improving crossings and also some support programs and events that the city can do to further encourage and market and raise awareness about walking throughout the city. The next theme focuses on cycling, and the overarching goal for cycling is to make bicycle use attractive and convenient for people of all ages and abilities. And it focuses firstly on developing what we're calling a comfortable bicycle network, and focusing on those types of facilities that are attractive and comfortable to a large segment of the population. And so this graphic illustrates the toolkit of bicycle facilities that you can look to and that the plan speaks to, ranging from multi-use pathways, which are physically separated from vehicles, cycle tracks or separated bicycle lanes, bicycle routes on local streets, and bicycle lanes and shoulder facilities. So there's a range of facilities in the toolkit, and we've developed a comprehensive long-term plan which identifies where these facilities would be throughout the city. This map here illustrates the long-term proposed bicycle network by facility type. And without focusing on the details of the lines on the map here, the theme is what we're hoping to achieve over the long term is a complete network where all residents are within close distance of a bicycle route, but making sure that these bicycle routes connect with major destinations so that they connect with the mobility hubs that you see there, connect with schools, and connect with other destinations throughout the city. But we recognize this is quite an extensive network, so we've also identified a priority network. And over the short term, over the next 5 to 10 years, where are the areas you might want to focus on in starting your upgrades to your bicycle network? And really some of the priorities that we've identified are connections between these mobility hubs and connections within mobility hubs and addressing gaps in the bicycle network. The next theme focuses on public transit. And the goal for transit is to make public transit a more economical, convenient, reliable, and practical transportation choice, and ultimately providing a level of service for transit that is attractive enough that we are enticing people who have choices to actually use transit because it is a frequent, direct, convenient transportation option. So to do so, the transportation plan, consistent with what BC Transit is currently developing through their Transit Future Plan, focuses on developing really a spine of transit facilities where we have frequent transit service throughout the day. And by frequent transit service, this is looking at transit service that's on each of these routes here with no more than 15 minutes between buses during the day and into the early evening for 15 hours a day, and at high peak periods, having even more frequent service than 15 minutes. And by having frequent service, direct connections, and reliable service, that can be an attractive option for residents to use transit. But on one corridor in particular, along the Island Highway, you'll see a blue line here. This is what we're calling rapid bus transit, and BC Transit has identified this as well. So this would provide an even higher level of service with limited stop spacing along Island Highway. So by focusing on these key corridors and providing really great service along these corridors, we think that's the most effective way to increase transit ridership and meet that target of 8% for transit in the future. And this would be supplemented by local transit services as well that would feed into this network, as well as passenger amenities at bus stops and transit exchanges that make transit use attractive and convenient. Things like providing benches and shelters at bus stops, ensuring bus stops are accessible, and providing good information and wayfinding at bus stops. So the next theme focuses on major roads. And this really integrates a lot of what I've been mentioning in terms of walking, cycling, and transit. One of the major themes for major roads is how do we make these more comfortable places and more attractive places for all road users, not just drivers, but drivers, cyclists, pedestrians, and transit users. And so there's a graphic here. It's admittedly a little hard to see the text here, but this shows two examples of how you can design your streetscapes. And on the top, this is an existing road classification where we have a 25-meter right-of-way, and you can see that the sidewalk is right up against the roadway, bicycles are shared with motor vehicles, and it provides facilities for pedestrians and cyclists and others, but not necessarily the most comfortable. So in the image on the bottom, you can see with the same cross-section how you might want to consider changing that streetscape in this example by incorporating bicycle lanes, so you provide separation between vehicles and bicycles, adding in some street trees, adding in a boulevard so there's some separation between vehicles and pedestrians, and having parked cars as well. So the plan recommends updating your street standards to focusing on what we call a complete streets approach. Again, this focuses on the needs of all road users, pedestrians, cyclists, transit users, and others. The second component of the major road network is accommodating and planning for future growth. And as I mentioned at the outset with the targets, we know that there will still be a significant increase in vehicle trips throughout the city. So we need to plan for that and at least protect for future options for road network enhancements. So there's a number of projects that have been identified over the future on an as-needed basis that the city will need to prioritize. A number of different types of projects include new roads to service new developments throughout the city as development occurs, some road enhancements in a number of areas, particularly the mobility hubs, looking at streetscape improvements and improvements to the pedestrian realm. Some of the features I was mentioning on the previous slide, looking at street trees and other amenities and transforming those streets. And then we also have a number of intersection improvements identified here to address safety issues and operational issues where there's traffic congestion. In addition to planning for future changes to the road network and recognizing that there will be an increase in vehicle trips, the plan also looks at ways we can minimize the impacts of this vehicle travel through ways in which we can try and manage travel demand throughout the city by shifting travel patterns throughout the day, encouraging more midday travel instead of peak period travel, encouraging low emissions vehicles, encouraging car sharing, and features such as that. So recognizing even if there will be more vehicles on the road, how can we still best manage those vehicles on the roadway? The next topic focuses on neighborhood transportation, and there's two main elements to neighborhood transportation. This is really focusing on your local residential streets throughout the city. And the plan is trying to create safer and more livable neighborhoods, firstly by developing more comfortable streets, and similar to what I was mentioning for major roads and providing complete streets that are more comfortable for all road users, looking at moving towards street types as you see on the right here, where we have landscape boulevards and street trees and a more comfortable environment for pedestrians and cyclists in your street design. And then secondly, looking at the design of neighborhoods at a broader scale and moving towards, where possible, a more traditional grid-style street network where you have good connections for pedestrians and cyclists in very walkable environments. May not always be possible, so if you can't get a full grid network in place, you can still work with a more subdivision or a suburban street pattern by providing what we call a fused grid, where even if you have cul-de-sacs, you can still look at pathways and other connections that make it more convenient for pedestrians and cyclists. The next theme focuses on parking, and what this is really looking at primarily is managing the impacts of parking in residential areas that are adjacent to what we know are major destinations throughout the city, particularly Vancouver Island University, the hospital, the BC Ferry terminals, and other major activity nodes where there are impacts on residential parking. So we still want to provide for residential parking and make sure that residents' needs are met and balancing the needs of the parking demand that's associated with those major institutions. And then we would also look at parking strategies within the downtown in particular, but also over time looking at other parking strategies within other mobility hubs and commercial areas to manage the impacts of parking. Things like reducing parking demand, providing flexible parking standards, providing shared parking, and features such as that. And then the final topic is looking at strategic connections. The first topics that I was presenting were all looking at the transportation network within the city, but we also want to recognize the importance of Nanaimo as a gateway to Vancouver Island and elsewhere throughout the province. And so this image here shows the range of connections and the ways Nanaimo is connected to other communities on Vancouver Island, to Metro Vancouver, and to elsewhere in Western Canada, whether that be by transit, road network, float plane, or airplane, or what have you. And so the plan has a number of policies and actions that support working with other agencies and transportation providers to strengthen and improve those connections elsewhere on the island and elsewhere in British Columbia as an important component of your economic development and commercial activities for the city. So that's a very brief overview of some of the key features of the plan. As I mentioned, we'll be taking this information to the public and having a next round of public consultation throughout the month of November, and that includes a stakeholder workshop on November 5th. We will be launching an online survey over the course of the next week, and that will be available throughout early November. So anybody can review some of the key features of the plan, review the discussion paper and open house display boards, and provide their comments and inputs and see if we've missed anything and provide guidance as we finalize the plan. And then there will be a number of open houses that will be rotating throughout the city in early November at Nanaimo North Town Centre, Country Club, University Village, Port Place, and Woodgrove Centre. We also have a website and email address available, so residents, stakeholders, and others can contact us and provide input on the plan and what they'd like to see. And as I mentioned, based on all the input that we will be collecting through the workshop, online survey, open houses, we'll be compiling that, summarizing the results, and going back to the Transportation Advisory Committee for comments, and at that point refining the key features of the plan, and then ultimately coming back to you later on this fall with a draft plan, and then finally a final plan for adoption. And this just shows the next steps. So once we finish that, we'll come back to you again for plan preparation and approval. And with that, I guess I would open it up to any questions.
There is a question. Are you, Mr. Foy, are you going to get involved now, or do you want to wait till the question period here? Why don't we start? We have Councillor Patchy to start with, so Councillor Patchy.
Okay, thank you, Worship. Thank you, Mr. Patterson, very much. I have a bunch of questions, but I'll limit myself to two. We have a rail line going through Nanaimo that may never see passenger rail traffic again, but nevertheless, the rail is there. And in this master plan, I do not see an attempt to use that rail for rapid transit. Why is that?
So, we do have some policies and actions in our Strategic Connections chapter that focus on preserving the ENN rail corridor for mobility options in the future. I don't know if you want to add anything.
I would just say, yes, that's consistent. So the plan, consistent with the OCP, identifies that preservation of the corridor is very important, and that specifically about preservation for the corridor for future rail transit. without without really because we don't understand right now, because there's a bit of uncertainty around what the function and role of the railway is going to be in the near term. So because of that uncertainty, we've just effectively said that we are looking to preserve that corridor for that function in the future. The other thing I would say is that if we're successful with this plan, we are absolutely laying the groundwork for that type of higher level transit service. If you think about something like LRT, what it needs is a number of high density nodes with a fair bit of population and employment concentrated along it. And so by preserving the corridor and building up over time that sort of land use pattern, we are really laying the groundwork in the future for that type of service. And when we look to recent rapid transit developments in British Columbia, like Canada Line and Northeast Sector, both of them started for 10 years or more with bus service, sort of high quality bus service. They built their ridership, and then eventually they were able to transition into that.
But part of the reason I'm asking that, in my native, the Netherlands, I see a really healthy use between regular rail service and rapid rail, commuter rail, on the same lines. And, that's a perfect example of how that can be combined in a sustainable way. That was number one. The other one is just a comment. I am the liaison between this council and a group called Access Nanaimo, whom I see mentioned in your contacts. I don't think I have missed a lot of meetings, but I have never seen in the minutes of Access Nanaimo input towards this master transportation plan.
I know that we did have some contact with Kirsty.
Kirsty Timas?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Okay.
But they will be back on to our list of invitees for the upcoming workshop. In fact, that invitation should have gone out already. If they haven't received an invitation, because perhaps we had her specific email, then if you were able to of course, we will reach out and make sure that they are invited.
Ms. Timas is studying law
in
outside
UBC, yes,
so we'd have to find somebody else. But
yes,
it's
right.
important to me that you keep up that contact.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Patterson, for your presentation. The question that I have is in regard to land use and the OCP, because as you mentioned earlier, transportation issues cannot really move forward unless they're connected to land use issues. So I was wondering if you could clarify a bit for myself and perhaps the other people on council about how this transportation master plan will link to our official community plan and will inform how we actually do transportation master planning.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So as I mentioned, your official community plan identifies a number of urban nodes and corridors and encourages growth and development to occur within those areas. So we're reinforcing that notion by identifying these mobility hubs for the transportation plan and supporting the notion of providing increased density, land use mix, and other features within those mobility hubs. But we're looking at it from a transportation perspective as well. So we're looking at what are the infrastructure requirements for transportation within these hubs. Things like providing sidewalks on both sides of the street within mobility hubs and having more pedestrian crossings and more bicycle facilities. And then also, as I mentioned, looking at the connections between mobility hubs as well, through transit, through cycling as well, and through the road network. So it's a combination of land use measures within these mobility hubs by increasing density and land use mix and encouraging growth to locate in these mobility hubs, but also looking at the transportation services and facilities that are required to promote shorter trips, promote alternative modes of transportation within and between these hubs. And it's all very, very integrated, looking at the land use and transportation pieces together there.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. I see no further questions from staff. Mr. Patterson and Mr. Foy, very, very interesting, and I'm sure we'll hear from you again at some point in the near future with another update as we move along. So thank you, and a big thank you for Councillor Anderson as well, who was chair of the Transportation Committee for the City of Nanaimo and doing a very capable job at that as well. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, we'll move into item 8A. and that's Community Safety and Development, and it's ZA1-51, General Amendments to Zoning Bylaw 4500. The purpose is to present the set of proposed general text and mapping amendments to Zoning Bylaw 4500, Attachment A, and we do have a delegation, Mr. Fred Taylor. Mr. Taylor? Do you have a question? Your name's on here. Why is your name on here?
Oh, I don't know. Must have hit it with my books.
My name is Fred Taylor, and I would like to take you to page 73. I speak against item 14, and that is to deal with the changing of zoning of a lot above Caledonia Park on Holly, towards Holly. And I will take you then to page 77, which is your map. 77 on the bottom. Now, the lot in question is, I guess, in bold lines, 350 Park Street. And if you look at the photo from City Map, you will find Park Street road edge is right along the edge of the track of the Caledonia Park. The city, about 20 years ago, bought 503, I guess it's Bradley or Holly, however you look at it, kitty corner to this 350 lot that's in question, with the idea of taking Holly Avenue down on an angle to Mill Street before the bridge to get rid of the dangerous corner and problem corner at Bradley and Wall Street. They hired a contractor who went into that hillside where Park Street and these lots are owned by the city, and the excavator almost floated down to the track, covered the track with all kinds of mud and soup and everything else because of the problem of that hillside. Now, if we're looking towards encouraging development of this hillside, it doesn't make sense when you're facing this problems elsewhere in the city about dangerous slopes and everything else. This slope also has, through the middle of those lots, about a 30-inch to 3-foot, I could get you the exact diameter, water stave pipe buried in it, which was the water supply to your electrical generation station for the city of Nanaimo, actually Nanaimo and Duncan Electric Latent Power on Caledonia Avenue. It went under the tracks. So my point is the city's hired a contractor, played around in this hillside with nothing but trouble. So we never got this Holly Street straightened out to go there because of problems. Now, if I get to the next picture, please. Here's a close-up showing you the lot and the road right up against the track. Next picture, please. Now, this is City Map. Come on, tell me what's wrong with it, Mr. Padgett, Councillor Padgett. What's wrong with it? What's wrong with that City Map? And you can go look at it right now.
I think the properties are in a different line than what I see here.
Come on, parks are green. Why isn't Caledonia green? What are you going to do with it? All residential lots?
That is a question, Mr. Taylor, you well know was asked at the Advisory Planning Committee, and maybe Mr. Tucker can respond to that answer.
Well, what's the initiative behind the scenes here? In camera what? And what are you doing with a Caledonia Park when the green's gone?
Would you allow Mr. Tucker to
Mr.
respond
Tucker,
to that?
That's right on City Map right now.
Any comment, Mr. Tucker?
I would have to check with our mapping people and see if an error is there, but this is certainly the first time I've seen this.
Well, it's been on City Map for quite some time. And I don't support Park Street, which is not named on the city map, going through right alongside the track. I don't support all those lots that are owned by the city on that hillside, which the city couldn't even build a road across them. I think in time, you've got to keep those lots along with 503, whatever it is up there on the corner of Holly and Bradley, for designing the road down to Wall Street, which she had the initiative, but the contractor couldn't do it at the time. So why place private people into the problems you people have experienced? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Did I want to ask him a question?
Oh, well, just say something. You just keep tapping me on my hand. I don't know
No,
what
I've
you
got my
want.
light.
Okay, well, go ahead.
Mr.
Taylor,
Mr.
Mr. Taylor,
Taylor,
come back. I didn't realize she had a question for you. Sorry.
you lost me a little bit on this one, on the map here. You're saying that Wall Street, there was supposed to be a right turn onto Park Street and then left onto Holly Avenue through 350? Was that the
They
proposal?
bought 350 for whatever reason of improving Holly. They had the idea of taking Holly on an angle, I guess through part of that lot, over to Wall Street to sort of get most of the traffic away from Bradley and Wall Street, because of the corner, and people are always hitting the fence and corner, and the city's always putting some barricades there on the corner. And you've even got a little bit of corner of the property taken off right on the corner there. And that was to straighten out that, because they recognized in transportation ideas that Holly is a fairly busy street for people, and wanted to come straight but on an angle down over to Wall and onto the bridge. And the city hired a contractor, and they had nothing but trouble because of water, everything else in that hillside. So if you're going to keep maintaining those lots and somebody's going to buy them because you're playing with the zoning now, then you're going to have somebody in there with a lot of problems on land that the city sold them.
Thank you.
So I support it being left alone and part of the natural beauty of Caledonia Park, along with Park Street or whatever you're calling it. It's never been developed, because who wants that road right along the edge of that track?
Is there a staff comment here? I see the light's on. That oh, now it's off. So, Councillor.
Your Worship, there certainly was a plan, as Mr. Taylor mentions, to realign Wall Street with Holly Street because of the chicane that Bradley Street and Holly Avenue have and the numerous complaints from the neighborhood. That project was actually canceled by council, and as far as staff is concerned, it's not part of our road networking mindset at this point. In fact, we haven't been purchasing properties as they've come up. One on the corner of Park and Wall Street came up, I think it was last year, and we decided not to pursue it because we had direction from council. So this is really an opportunity for council to maintain the properties, as Mr. Taylor says, just as part of the park's inventory, or provide flexibility for disposing of them in the future if council deems them to be surplus to our needs. And that's what the subject of the rezoning is about.
If I may add to our city manager, I don't believe those lots across in that Park Street that's proposed are part of Caledonia Park, but no harm in it being there because of the unstable bank, etc. So to eliminate this dangerous problem, consolidate them with the park.
Okay, the questions for the delegation or staff?
To staff, actually.
Okay, Councillor Kipp, is yours to the delegation or to staff?
Well, to staff, actually.
Okay, so,
Well, one to Mr. Taylor.
okay, go ahead.
Mr. Taylor, in this situation, would you rather see something like a small comprehensive area plan for this, so that, I mean, I could see if that house was moved on 5-7, the one you talk about buying on the corner, if that was moved over and put onto a lot down below or next to it, you could almost put a roundabout in that area.
Well, the problem is you could even put it on 503, that house. But the reason you bought 503, the next corner towards Holly, was you were counting on just neighborhood or limited amount of traffic onto Bradley and Wall Street corner, because you were going to put Holly as the main road down over that bank to the bridge. And it still may be done at some time with a lot of drainage situation and everything, but I think for the time being, is the city wise to try and sell that? And you also have a pathway across it, I believe, to the N.L. rail tracks and down to Barsby Park, which
Middle
you're
of that
paying
lot, middle of that lot, the trail runs right
through those lots.
Well, through
Yeah.
the one that we're actually talking about today, the trail runs right through the middle of it.
Yeah. So, and you're paying a big fee for the crossing of the railroad there. So why you're going to eliminate that pathway?
Further to staff, if I can.
Okay, well, just one second. Well, okay, maybe better finish. You hopped in, okay, Councillor Patchy, if you want to go first, and
Thank you, Worship, to staff as well. No, I agree with Mr. Taylor that that whole setup at Holly Avenue and Bradley Street and Wall Street is not a very pleasant experience. So why would a previous council have cancelled that plan to try and improve that situation?
Your Worship, I can't answer directly for each council member, but I believe it was from public input from the neighborhood not wanting a through street,
Okay.
a more direct through street.
So
Actually, because the contractor, I can name him too, but trying to do it, he had the contract from the city doing it. He got it in problems.
So just that I'm straight here. The only reason that we have this here is because the CS2 was carried forth from bylaw 4000 to the new one, and we're trying to bring that into harmony with the rest of the property there. Is that correct?
Your Worship, absolutely. However, this property is not part of the park system, and I'm fully open to council's direction to put it as part of the park system. And rezoning it to the residential one allows you flexibility in the future for disposing it if you like.
And that was my last question. Is there any connection between this and what we might have to do at Caledonia Park at some point?
Your Worship, absolutely there could be use for this in the future with Caledonia Park.
That is the answer I got at the Advisory Planning Committee, and that's why I voted in favor of having this on here.
Having it what?
having it on, I think he said, yeah. Now, Councillor Kipp, you're next.
Well, no, I'd move receive the delegation if there's no more.
Okay, I thought you had something for the staff.
For staff, no,
Okay.
but not related to Mr. Taylor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Through the staff.
Yep.
If we pulled this specific one off tonight and asked for more information or comprehensive planning, that wouldn't throw the bylaw off, would it?
Your Worship, yes, this would be an amendment to the bylaw. I think that's all tied together. So my recommendation, if you'd like that, is to refer it back to staff, and we'll adjust it with that direction if you so do.
Or do we? I guess from my perspective, the only concern that I have with this specific piece of property is that that area is a congested area. I know previously I was on council when we talked about that the community was against having the road go through there. There was some contractor issues, but also during the plan, I believe we were stopping traffic turning onto Bradley or something too. There was going to be a one-way, and the traffic was going to go up to Wall Street, onto Holly, and then all the traffic that would have normally gone onto Bradley and not past Brecken School would have had to go onto Townside and up Brecken or a cut up Rose Hill. So I believe that was one of the community problems, that they're going to cut off the left turn to Bradley coming up the hill and cut that road through and come across the lot we talked about onto Holly, and then all the traffic that would have gone down Bradley would now run past the school. So I think that was one of the community concerns. When I see something like this and there's empty lots, and I wish we could reconfigure the thing to work for our future and not just the disposition of one lot. I mean, I understand this is a road end and they're sometimes easy just to deal with that specific thing, but there's a cross on the other side where the easement goes through to what I will say the east of 350. There's a couple of lots in there with an easement across it. The trail goes right through 350 onto Park, and then to the right or to the left of that or to the west of 350, there's those three other lots. and they're all vacant except for the one corner lot now. And it'd be nice to see some more comprehensive come through. This is just really a disposition, future disposition of this lot. So,
Mrs. Raby, did you have a comment? Maybe not. So are you suggesting then maybe we should refer this back?
I'm sorry, Your Worship?
Are you suggesting we refer this back to staff to look at? Or is this issue dealing with that site 350 going to be a problem?
Your Worship, I'm at your pleasure, the council's pleasure, what you'd like to do. I think it's logical to rezone it to residential and keep our options open in the future.
Let's try it and see.
I would move that council receive for information a report pertaining to zoning amendment bylaw 2013, number 4500.053.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
And I'd move the bylaw, that zoning bylaw amendment bylaw 2013, number 4500.053, ZA1-51-11, text amendments and 10 map changes past first reading.
Second motion. Discussion on this one. Councillor Kipp? Nope. Okay. Councillor Anderson, you didn't have any. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Worship. Just a question to staff on our options moving forward to protect this area from future development, or giving us the option to have a comprehensive development. Could you please explain to me what happens if we proceed with this zoning bylaw amendment, what our options are as its owner?
Your Worship, staff would look for council direction in terms of what you would like to do in terms of disposition or any planning. We had no plans to do anything except rezone it concurrent with the neighborhood and then leave it alone pending further discussions with council. If council would like a comprehensive plan brought forward, we'd be more than happy to work on that for you. Or if you'd like single dispositions, we're here to serve in that regard as well.
So this becomes surplus city land?
Yes, Your Worship. At the time, the decision not to relocate Wall Street, that would be my opinion.
And the zoning would be R1?
That we're proposing, yes.
That you're proposing.
And if I follow up, Your Worship, and if it was, well, zoned R1, how would we go about procuring this for park purposes or an extension of Caledonia Park?
Well, Your Worship, I would look for a direction from council to include these properties and maybe the closure of Park Street and consolidation with the park as a motion.
Is that a motion for a report back to council on the consolidation of these properties and our options?
Yes, Your Worship.
And would that be appropriate to make following the second reading?
Well, Your Worship,
or included in the second reading?
It's appropriate anytime. I might suggest that if that's the case, that we don't proceed with the rezoning of it, that we actually refer the whole issue back to staff, and that we'll come back with a report and an amended bylaw for the amendment bylaws dealing with removing it from the bylaw.
Thank you.
Okay, so what's council's pleasure? Do we want to, sorry? Question on the motion, and then that is just bylaw 1 only, is that not correct? So that it pass first reading. Councilor Brennan.
Yeah, I'd be interested in knowing, are there tenants in this property at this time? No? Okay, thank you. No how?
There's only one house in the corner lot.
Your Worship, if I may.
You're on.
Your Worship, the reason I was asking those questions is because I'm not even sure of the urgency of doing this now, other than the fact that it's on our agenda tonight. And if we refer this back to staff for this, for an opportunity for a report to come back on the consolidation of this property and how we may have options available to us, I think that would be far more prudent right now than proceeding with the second reading. And that is the position that I will be taking, so I won't be voting in favor of this.
Well, if that's why I was asking earlier that, that the next speaker, of course, is Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't feel that we do need to refer this back to staff. I think it's pretty clear in the report. I think that we as a council should just make the decision on it, and I don't really see, the only option I heard that was spoken of was an option to consolidate it and turn it into park, and I think we already have a park around there, and if we decide that we want to sell it or do something in the future, we can do that, and I think those options will be available in the future as well. So I will be voting in favor of the bylaw.
Okay, I understand that, but it's just a question to staff that I have first, and then Councillor Brennan has one. But if we go ahead and it's subsequently zoned R1, that zoning gives us some flexibility. We could change it back. Could we change it to a later definition if we felt that park status was more important?
Certainly, Your Worship. Rezone it to RS1 as a holding zoning, if you will, until the Caledonia parking plan. That could be a subsequent motion that we don't do anything with these properties until we have a plan for Caledonia Park. That's perfectly valid as well.
Okay, Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I'm going to support this because there are text amendments and mapping changes that have to be made. If we support this now, that's what will happen, and then we can, pull out this particular property and deal with that separately. There's no reason why it can, I'm assuming there's no reason why it couldn't be amended at another time. So I'm going to support this on that basis. There's other work that's included here, and I think it would just hold that up.
Okay, Councillor Beswick, do you have something here? No? Okay, so question on the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Beswick, Councillor Kipp, and Councillor McKay opposed. Balance council in favor. The motion passes.
Bylaw amendment bylaw 2013 number 4500.053 pass second reading.
Is there a second? No, we did one. This is two. We're doing that one there. So question on the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor McKay, Councillor Kipp, and Councillor Beswick opposed. Balance council in favor. The motion passes. We're going into 8B, the liquor license application, LA 97, application for a permanent change to a liquor license, Carlos O'Brien's at 7024 Stewart Avenue. The purpose is to advise council of the application in advance of staff requesting comments from adjacent property owners and occupants in order to establish a municipal resolution which is required before the province will consider the application further. And the staff recommendation is that they receive for information.
So moved.
Moved. Second. Discussion on this one? Go ahead.
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. Is the gross, this question to staff, is the gross area of the patio increasing or is it remaining the same?
Mr. Tucker?
The occupant load from the patio is increasing from 20 to 38.
I realize the occupant load is increasing. Is the square footage of the space in which it's going increasing?
I'm not, don't believe it is.
But they did have a configuration they gave us with a larger mezzanine in there. Is that a factor in this?
Yes, Your Worship. They are actually constructing a mezzanine to increase the number, but they don't show any plans to increase the size of the deck that I'm aware of either. But we can verify that.
So then the reason I asked the question, so the seating capacity is going to double, although the square footage of the space is going to remain the same. And just a second question that I have is that currently it's the license is for 120 persons and we're moving to 190 persons. So simply and I realize that they're adding a mezzanine to this. So we're going up to 165 patrons and 25 staff. So we're moving up 45 patrons, including the patio. So that'd be 18 outside and 27 or whatever that number is inside. Is that what's happening?
That's good. When the patio is open, that counts towards the occupant load. During the winter months, they would be inside.
So seasonally indoors, the occupant load always remains at 190?
The occupant load is based on patrons plus staff, and it's a total of 190. That's correct.
So if the patio is closed and it occupies 38 people, we can increase inside by 38? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
The total occupant load for the facility is 190. Yes, that's right.
Is that typical with licensed establishments that have patios, that in the seasonality, when you close your outdoor patio, that you can move those seats inside in the same footprint?
Your Worship.
This seems rare to me.
Well,
I could be wrong.
I'm drawing from memory on this, but I think the law has actually changed that it's just a gross number now, and where they allocate them, whether they're in or out, given our seasons as well, that they used it during the winter, but that it's just a gross number and they can be anywhere on the area that they've defined, which includes the balcony or within. So it comes down to a function of seats and how they want to distribute that number. And
thank you.
Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. Does VIA have the absolute authority then? If they will limit the number to 165 people, is this, why is this application going forward?
well, that's up to council, of course, on whether you want to recommend it at the end of the day, and they'll take that into consideration.
Okay. And it'll go before the neighborhood, the Breckenhood neighbor?
That's correct. This is the
Breckenhill.
start of the process. The RCMP will review it, the neighborhood association will review it, and we'll bring back a report with their comments after that.
Thank you.
But the final decision will actually be made in Victoria by the...
That's correct.
So, Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Is this motion on the floor right now? Like, has that happened?
Well, it's just to receive for information.
Yeah, that one.
But the motion's on the floor, but it hasn't been voted on.
Okay, then I'm happy to receive this for information and let the process unfold, let the neighborhood have their say, let the RCMP advise us and the community, and so that VIHA and Victoria have the sentiments and the support or non-support of the people who live around there and the people who work around there. I think it's good practice to do that, and this is the beginning of the opportunity to allow the neighborhood to have a say. And if we try to influence that in a different way, then I think that we sort of confine the neighborhood's ability to have their say and have it sort of unfettered by council's position at this point with very little information. So okay. I'm in support of receiving this.
Okay, Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Richard. I agree 100%. This is also part of the due process where we have the opportunity to ask questions of the staff report that we're presented with. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so the motion is to receive. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We're moving into development permit DP 839 at 662 Albert Street. Purpose to obtain council authorization to issue a development permit for a 4-unit multifamily development.
I move that council issue development permit number DP 839 at 662 Albert Street with the following variances, subject to road dedication prior to the issuance of a building permit. 1, required front yard setback, Albert Street, major collector. The required front yard setback is 6 meters after a road dedication of 2.5 meters. The proposed front yard setback after the required road dedication is 2.13 meters, a proposed variance of 3.87 meters. 2, required rear yard setback. The required rear yard setback is 7.5 meters. The proposed rear yard setback is 2.59 meters, a proposed variance of 4.91 meters. 3, required side yard setback west. The required side yard setback is 1.5 meters. The proposed side yard setback is 1.45 meters, a proposed variance of 0.05 meters. 4, lot coverage. The maximum lot coverage is 40%. The proposed lot coverage is 46%. A proposed variance of 6%. 5, maximum building height. The maximum, sorry, there's a lot here. The maximum building height is 7.75 meters. The proposed building height is 7.89 meters. A proposed variance of 0.14 meters. And lastly, required driveway access. The required access width for two-way traffic is 5.5 meters. The proposed access to the underground parkade is 3.05 meters. A proposed variance of 2.45 meters.
I didn't hear that. Could you repeat it?
So, Councillor Reeves, you want to second that?
I'll second that and
then speak to it.
Thank you, Your Worship. I didn't want to interrupt Councillor Anderson.
No, he's doing a wonderful job.
This last one required driveway access. It seems, is this is quite narrow, 3.05 meters. Two vehicles are going to get by each other on that? Seems a bit tight.
Mr. Tucker?
Yes, this is a 4-unit building is proposed with 4 underground parking stalls. So this is the access into the underground. So the idea is that you have very few neighbors, you're good neighbors, hopefully, and that you would get out of each other's way as you come and go through that narrower opening.
Sure, okay.
Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. Question to staff with regards to the 6% over the maximum allowable lot coverage. There was a suggestion from the neighborhood association from NOCA that might not be such a good idea, and then you responded to that by way of your notations on whatever the page is. I've lost it. In any case, when NOCA in this case comes to you with a suggestion that that feels too tight, and you say it probably is acceptable, do you get a response from them after that, or is that the end of it?
In this case, we've not carried on a dialogue on that topic.
You did carry on?
No, did not.
You did not, okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. I see no further discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into item D, development permit DP 851 at 326 Wigasai Avenue. Purpose to obtain council authorization to issue a development permit for a 4-story, 36-unit multi-family building.
I would move that council issue development permit number DP 851 at 326 Wakasai Avenue with support for the following 2 variances and is subject to road dedication prior to the issuance of a building permit. 1, required on-street parking. The required on-street parking is 59 parking spaces. 39 spaces are supplied on site. A proposed variance of 20 parking spaces. And 2, required rear yard for an accessory building. The required rear yard setback for an accessory building is 3 meters. The proposed setback is 0 meters. A proposed variance of 3 meters.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Yeah. You're on here for that one? Okay, let me move you down. You're on.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have to say I don't tend to like to vote for parking variances, but based on the area that it's in, that it's close to the university, and most of the people who will probably actually be utilizing this space are students, and it's the close amenities such as the aquatic center, the ice center, and the university, and proximity to the downtown core all make sense. And I'm very happy as well that there's the accessory building that's being supplied for cycling and so on. This plan, I believe, actually links quite well to what our transportation master plan is trying to bring about. So I'm fully supportive of this development permit.
Yeah, I support it too. I think the actual suites are fairly small, and I think they felt the developer indicated that probably there'll only be 1 car for each space, and even those might not be required or happen. So I think it's a great idea. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I like this too, and I actually like giving parking variances and downward, because I think that it's one of those actions that we can take that will drive people out of their cars and onto transit or walking. Like the, well, I see one of my colleagues shaking his head, but I know they do this in Vancouver, and it's very dense, and they have a pretty high transit rates. At any rate, I think this drives people onto the streets to walk to their destination, either to town or to the university or to University Village, wherever they're going, and over to the park. I think it's a great idea, and every time I see an application coming in asking to have lower parking requirements, I'm actually quite pleased.
Okay. I thought you had him won over for a minute. He took his name off, but he slammed it back on again. So, Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And not to say that I'm against parking variances, but if you look at certain neighborhoods, you have to make sure that you're cognizant of the variances that you're putting in. So, for example, if it's the hospital area, you want to make, I would say that we should be aware of the variances that we're giving. If it's country club, such as what we did at Country Club Drive, I think that makes sense because it's close to the proximity of the bus stations and so on. But I would also mention that we are Nanaimo, not Vancouver, so there's still some more things that we need to do in regards to density, and I think that was actually outlined within our Transportation Master Plan and trying to develop those mobility hubs so that when we do vary parking, such as what you're suggesting, we can do that with more confidence.
Okay, I see no questions now. Oh, I do. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Your Worship. Questions through you to staff. Have we had any questions from the community with concerns about on-street parking with this variance?
Your Worship, I'm not aware of any, given that it's a development permit. I'll ask Andrew Tucker to respond. We certainly get lots of comments about on-street parking throughout the community. And it's a constant discussion about who's allowed use of the parking on the street. But in this particular case, I'm not aware of any.
Thank you.
Okay, I see no further questions. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We'll move into E, Development Permit DP 857 at 2230 McGargoyle Road. The purpose is to obtain council authorization to renew development permit DP 679 for a two-story industrial building located at 2230 McGargoyle Road with two variances. Would someone like to move?
Your Worship, I move that council authorize the renewal of development permit DP 679 for a two-story industrial building with the two variances.
Okay, moved and second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Rezoning application RA 325 at 1100 Mon, is it? I think it's pronounced Mon Road. Purpose to present a rezoning application for property located at 1100 Mon Road to rezone the property from light industrial I2 to industrial I4 in order to permit medical marijuana growing and production. We do have a delegation, and Mr. Brendan Kennedy. Welcome, sir. CEO of Lafayette Ventures Limited. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. My name is Brendan Kennedy, and I'm the president of Lafayette Ventures, and I'm joined by my colleague, Tanya Winchester. About 4 months ago, I met with a delegation from Health Canada, and they were asking us to make an investment in the emerging medical cannabis industry in Canada as part of their shift into the new set of regulations. We spent about 4 months going across Canada to different provinces, meeting with not only people that were selling real estate and leasing real estate, but also with applicants who were applying for a license to Health Canada in order to produce, process, and distribute cannabis. In our search, we came across the piece of property at 1100 Mon Road, and it seemed like an ideal piece of property for us. It had been vacant for approximately 2 years, And so we moved forward with an offer to acquire that piece of property. And our offer was accepted approximately 1 month ago by the previous owner, or current owner, I guess. In the course of the last month, we realized that there were 8 parcels in Duke Point that were zoned I2. While we were looking at that particular piece of property, I'm somewhat embarrassed to admit that we thought all of Duke Point was I4. The piece of property at 1100 Mon Road is adjacent to the north by a piece of property that's zoned I4, and then to the east. So it has I4 on 2 sides, but it is one of 8 parcels that is zoned I2. Our intent is to we're not intending to do anything to the exterior of the building other than some minor upgrades in regards to security required by Health Canada as part of their regulations. We are interested in applying for a permit to remodel the interior of the building. We have contracted with a local architect and engineering firm in order to design those changes. Our intent is to spend approximately $1.5 to $2 million to remodel the interior of the space, and then our intent is to produce, process, and distribute cannabis to MMPR patients, most likely via the new FedEx facility at the Nanaimo Airport. I don't have any presentation tonight, but I was mostly interested in coming here and answering any questions that you might have.
Okay, sir. I actually don't see any questions right now from council at this point. The very first step on this one, Councillor Pashi, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Your involvement with Health Canada prescribes a certain timeline, I would imagine, that you have to have things in place. And if that's so, when would that be?
So our intent is to remodel, upgrade the interior of the building. It has housed a flea market until about a week ago, and was used as storage. I'm not sure how long it has served that particular need, but the interior our intent would be to remodel it between December and January and early February, and then to commence grow operations inside the facility starting in February in order to ship the initial product on April 1st, which is the date in which Health Canada is switching from the current set of regulations into the new system, the MMPR system. And so our goal would be to ship product on April 1st.
Follow up, if I may. You're probably aware that we have been alerted to the fact that there may be some taxation issues that we need to get our head around. And so the suggestion is maybe that we go back with this to staff to get the goods, so to speak, on what we can get out of BC assessment and what the consequences might or might not be for our tax base as we know it right now on industrial land. So the reason I'm mentioning this is I prefer not to interfere with the timeline that you have, but if we did this, would a couple of weeks make a large difference to you?
For us, time is of the essence. We're already a bit behind schedule, and I believe that most of the other applicants are under a deadline to get a crop going. It takes approximately 90 days from start to harvest, with an additional week or two for packaging. We have been in conversations with members of the city staff and members of the tax assessment group in Victoria in order to come to some sort of resolution. The interior of the building would be used for production, but then also for processing and packaging. And then we intend to have a small testing lab in order to test the product for mold, mildew, fungus, pesticides, any contaminants. I personally don't see how the building, it could ever be assessed as agriculture, because so much of it is being done inside. And it's my understanding that we would actually need to apply for that change, and that's not something that we intend to do. If I could figure out a way to contractually enter into some sort of agreement, agreeing never to ask for that change, that is something we would be interested in doing, but we haven't been able to find a way to enter into that agreement.
Okay. Your Worship, final follow-up then to staff, if I may, and I would like to have the city manager's reaction to what we've heard tonight.
What was the question?
Your Worship, we certainly apologize for the lateness of which we have become aware of the Assessment Authority's position, and as the applicant stated, we're all working hard to find ways to contractually find a way to ensure that both this owner or the future owners would never be able to back out of not applying for farm status. But to my knowledge, there isn't a way that I have found as of yet. But we will continue to work with our solicitor and their solicitors to find every avenue that's possible. One of the options for council, of course, is to proceed to first and second reading with this application, let it still continue, and not proceed to public hearing until we have that clarified. And that at least keeps the application moving forward, allows us a little more time, because it's not so much the 2 weeks, it's the timing that happens with when we advertise for rezonings that sometimes can cause a month delay in terms of when the public hearings are.
Okay, so if I hear you correct, if we go first and second reading, don't go to public hearing, in that time frame, a lot of stuff could be found out.
Yeah, absolutely, Your Worship.
Okay.
And we're not obliged.
All right.
Well, the direction I would hope to get from council is not proceed to a public hearing until such time as we have resolution to this issue, because we need this information for the public to hear at a public hearing, if that's in fact what we have.
If I can, Mr. Kennedy, one of the concerns, maybe we'll make it a little more black and white. We have a finite amount of industrial land available. It is probably one of the land zonings that we have the least amount of. And I can only speak for myself, but if there is a mechanism where you or any company could come along and apply under agriculture and get it exempt and not pay a dime in taxes for industrial land, I'd have a real problem with that. This is expensive land, and if it's gone, we can't get it back. So I'd like to make sure that there is some way that we can protect the integrity of the property and collect the industrial taxes that we're due. And if that wasn't your plan, we'll find another purchaser, because there's more out there, you know. I just feel strongly that for us to give away, which is effectively what we're doing, because if you're buying it from a private landholder, which you are, and if you're not going to pay any taxes, which in some cases you may not, what's the benefit to the city?
So, in order to apply for a waiver with, in terms of taxes, that waiver for 2014 we would need to file that, I believe, October 31st. We have no intent to file anything by Friday. The benefits to the city would be over the next 3 to 4 months, we intend to spend $1.5 to $2 million upgrading the facility. In the next year, we will hire 30 to 40 individuals, giving them full-time employment. And we will be using the newly developed shipping facility at the Nanaimo Airport. We'll be creating jobs, we'll be creating salaries that will be spent in this municipality. And I would also say that this is a building that's been vacant for the last 2 years, and we intend to upgrade it and revitalize it in an area where there are a number of facilities and pieces of property that are for sale and not currently being used to their fullest capabilities.
Okay, sir, thank you. Councillor Patchy, you're
I'm
finished,
done,
aren't you?
sorry.
So, Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. You have answered my questions about monetary opportunities and employment opportunities for the city, so thank you.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Worship. My question is to staff. I don't know if anybody else has any questions for the delegation, if they want to receive the delegation, but mine is for staff.
Well, let's...
See the delegation.
Okay. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
My question to staff is, so the BC Assessment Authority will be responsible for defining whether or not this is an agricultural use or not, and if it turns out that it's an agricultural use, then it will be in the form of farm category, and then if it is in the form of farm category, how does that impact or influence the tax situation that we may or may not be entitled to or otherwise?
Well, Your Worship, there's a little twist to in terms of whether how the assessment authority comes up with the agricultural use. And as the applicant said, it's whether or not the applicant applies for farm status. And in terms of the actual assessment that's made, it's a little bit like if you think of a winery, in terms of the growing of the grapes would be possibly assessed as an agricultural use, whereas the wine tasting and the sales would be assessed at a commercial rate. And the same would apply here. Part of the use for sure is agricultural in nature and would likely get some sort of assessment if it was asked for related to a farm use, and part of it would be assess something else given the other uses that go into packaging it and processing it.
With that said, and given that there's still some uncertainties, I'm sensing some trepidation in whether or not we should proceed with the application and allow it to go through the first and second readings and not to a public hearing until such time as we have all of the information as it relates to the tax assessment, or refer it back to staff. I'm just not sure which one is, to get the tax implication information, which one's better or worser, because we're not approving anything.
Well, Your Worship, it really comes down to the applicant's suggested time frame for getting an operation, and whether council feels comfortable moving forward to a certain point in the process and then receiving the information, or whether you'd like the whole process stopped until you have that information before you consider first and second reading tonight. I'm certainly comfortable with moving forward, giving it first and second reading, and providing the information to council before a public hearing. I'm okay with that, and that may save the applicant a month's time if the dates were to not coincide correctly, and that's what I would recommend if you would like to do.
Okay.
Thank you for that explanation. Thank you.
Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to staff, is it possible in a circumstance like this to place a covenant on the facility to ensure that it's maintained as a commercial enterprise?
Your Worship, that's a great question. That's what we addressed with the solicitor today, because that's typically how we react. We react with, well, how can we covenant the property? In this case, you're not covenanting to restrict the uses, and so that led us to, so it's not possible, and that led us to, can we have a side contract with the owner of the property that they never apply for the farm status? And there's case law that talks about that you can't do that. You can't get in the way of the assessment authority's ability to do their job. Having said that, I still think there's room for investigating how we might be able to do that in terms of a contract with the property owner that has some ties to maybe servicing and that sort of thing. We have to look at that.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Brennan.
I'm satisfied with the suggestion that we go to first and second reading. The applicant's here. They've listened to the discussion. I'm sure that they understand that they shouldn't be dumping a whole pile of money into the process at this point. But it does kind of kickstart it, gets it moving. I think this is a kind of important, it's a change to, for us, and it's a change to marijuana production laws. And I think that it's an interesting opportunity, and we might, try to seize that opportunity without giving the applicant false hope that we're going to resolve this tax revenue issue. So if you would accept a motion, I would move that.
Okay, why don't we a couple more speakers, then I'll come back to you for the motion. Councillor Kip.
Well, thank you. Well, I know there's a few details we have to smoke out on this one. I had to get that in. If the owner doesn't want to do it, a covenant idea works for me, that they would agree to a covenant to not do this. But then there's also the ability to create the business and then sell it, right, as a new business. So it is a new economy. It's headed that way. There's going to be huge production. BC has like 4 or 5 times the licensing requests that most other provinces. We just went through, there's a couple of medical marijuana presentations all as well. I'm willing to move this forward, and if we have to, delay the public hearing to find out. But I think we can move this forward. I do have a concern with the I-4 zoning, the need for some I-2 zoning. But I also think that our zoning bylaws have to be open enough in that area, especially to mix the new high-tech economies with the new businesses that are coming in, the old businesses. I think we have to be able to mix that area up. So I think we have to be open-minded to this one. Thank you. So
Okay.
I support moving it forward.
Okay, and I also do for the first and second reading as well. And then there's some unanswered questions that I still have, and I think we can get them answered before the public hearing. Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship. So if the applicant were to have purchased a piece of property further down Mon Road that was zoned I-4, we wouldn't be having any of this conversation, and the same end could be facing us. In fact, the entire I-4 zone throughout Duke Point, if somebody wanted to put in a bank of greenhouses to produce food, using some waste heat off of Harmac, they could in fact apply for farm status. Am I correct?
Your Worship, we would be having a different discussion about whether we want to take action to prevent any construction until we changed bylaws. And of course, that's up to council on whether we would proceed with that. But you're correct, the zoning was in place. What we didn't anticipate was the assessment issue. But it clearly presents a bigger issue for the remaining properties that I think we need to address so that we don't lose our industrial tax base altogether at the I-4, in the I-4 zone.
Well, but my point is, that anywhere in I-4, in any I-4 zones, we're the one that said that the growth of medical marijuana had to go to I-4. So now here we are with this dilemma, regardless of whether this property is I-2 or not. The question is, do we create all the other ones, make them all I-4? It's a quandary, there's no doubt about it. But I certainly don't want to hold up the applicant by holding up a public hearing, because the same thing, we'd be facing the same question if he was, 4 doors down the road, with the exception of the zoning issue. So I'd say we do first and second reading. I'm in favor of doing first and second reading and not hold up public hearing. We'll figure it out, I would hope.
Okay, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There seems to be some, I'd say confusion for myself instead of saying confusion for all of council. If we approve receiving this for information, would we then ask for a report from staff asking for clarification about ways that we can stop the movement from the current zoning, commercial zoning, to farmland status? So if we were to approve receiving it for information, would that be the next step? Because I think that's what I'm hearing from some of my colleagues in regards to wanting to make sure that we continue to keep that tax base.
Yeah, Your Worship, that's one option. The option also put on the floor was that staff continue to explore the option of taxation, allow this process to move forward to first and second reading, and hopefully have the information necessary to move forward.
So if I may follow up, do we need to make a subsequent motion after moving the bylaws, or will staff just proceed and go ahead with bringing that information to council?
Your Worship, we would bring the information to council's attention.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I see now we have moved and seconded and voted, I think, on the motion to receive the information. We have not. It has been moved and seconded. On the motion itself?
Motion to receive the information for the report.
Second. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
I'll move bylaw, the zoning amendment bylaw 2013, number 4500.054, RA 325, to rezone the property at 1100 Mon Road from light industrial I2 to industrial I4 in order to permit the medical marijuana growing and production. Pass first reading.
Okay, it's seconded by Councillor Beswick. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And
the zoning amendment bylaw 2013, number 4500.054, pass second reading.
Seconded by Councillor Beswick. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into item G, Social and Health Network, purpose to provide council with the input gathered from service providers in Nanaimo as to the key social and health issues facing the community. And the staff recommendation and the motion is that one, to receive the findings and recommendations arising from the City of Nanaimo's social and health forums, and two, direct staff to revise the social development strategy and the accompanying social status report based on the social and health forums, and three, direct the Social Planning Advisory Committee, SPAC, to SPAC, to convene an annual social and health forum to facilitate collaboration on key issues and encourage actions to address those issues.
Move staff's recommendation, Your Worship.
Okay, seconder? Moved and seconded. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And section 17, 72, and 73 of the Community Charter, dealing with the property at 236/240 Halliburton Street. It's requested that council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to 236 or 240 Halliburton Street.
Receipt of the correspondence from Mr. Ken Williams, owner of 236/240 Halliburton Street, requesting that council allow him.
Okay, but there may be somebody else in attendance that would like to speak to that property, just in the event that there is. But having seen none, now we'll go into the correspondence.
I move receipt of the correspondence from Mr. Ken Williams, owner of 236/240 Halliburton Street, requesting that council allow him 24 months to repair and rehabilitate the property. Okay. Just receipt for information.
Yeah. Second. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
And then I'd move,
staff recommendation?
I move that council, pursuant to section 17, 72, and 73 of the Community Charter, resolve that one, due to a partial roof collapse, state of deterioration, and general unsafe nature of the building located at 236/240 Halliburton Street, and legally described as Lot 10, Block 9, Section 1, Plan 584, except part in Plan VIP 51709, the property is considered to be in or creates an unsafe condition. As such, 2, the owner of the property is hereby required to demolish the building and leave the site clean and tidy within 30 days, and 3, if not completed within 30 days, the city or its agents shall demolish the buildings and leave the site clean and tidy at the expense of the owner.
Is there a seconder for that? Seconded. Now, just Ms. King, can we take all three together, or do they have to be done seriatim? All three? Okay. So I see no discussion. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We're moving into I, disposition of 100 Gordon Street for the Conference Center Hotel. The purpose is to obtain council endorsement for the agreements linked to the conditions precedent to the sale of the city-owned land at 100 Gordon Street to SSS Manho.
I'd move that council
associated with the sale of city-owned land at 100 Gordon Street and for a conference center hotel to SSS Manho, and authorize the mayor and corporate officer to execute the necessary documents to affect the transition. He's laughing at how I pronounced it.
Very forceful, thank you very much.
Thank you,
It's been moved and
Your
seconded.
Worship.
Is that, no discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So, well, it's pretty exciting. We're still moving ahead on the hotel, and I think that's something I think everyone, certainly on council, and I hope everyone in Nanaimo thinks is a very exciting opportunity for the city. We're moving into item J, and that's the animal trapping and wildlife management. The purpose is to provide council with information on the existing regulations for animal trapping within the community and to provide options for council's consideration. And the staff recommendation is before us. If anyone would like to, Councillor Pachi.
I'll move that. Your Worship, I move that the staff recommendation, which is number 1, that we receive for information the report regarding animal trapping and wildlife management. And number 2, that direct that trapping is not to be used by the city as a method of managing beavers, and that staff report back in 1 year on the environmental and financial implications.
Okay.
And I move that, Your Worship, after which I have another motion I'd like to
Okay,
make.
fine. It's been seconded by Councillor Beswick. And any discussion on this particular one? Councillor Anderson, you have, no?
Yep.
You're in? Okay, and I'll take Councillor Pachi off. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just through you to staff, I was just curious if you would be able to tell me how often the city would use this type of trapping. If you're able to give me any number, it might be something that you might not be able to give me, but I'm just
Your
curious.
Worship, I don't have any accurate, I know we haven't done any, to my knowledge, in the last little bit, but it really depends on the year in terms of the environmental conditions, but I don't have an exact number for you.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any, Mr. Swaby, does staff have any comments on it?
Tom, do you have any?
Maritan, in certain cases, we've had trapping of beaver. We've trapped at Dyra Lake and relocated to Caudle Lake, which we wanted beavers in that area to reestablish that lake. We've had trouble on Chase River, though, where we've had to, because of drainage, do some trapping there. That was about 3 years ago. So there's been certain circumstances, but we first worked to remove the dams and try and do the best we can with the drainage.
But it's done on a very irregular basis then?
Not that regular, yes.
Okay. So we've voted on that. No. No, you're giving me the head shake there. So it's been moved and seconded, I know that much. And so, and I just see no further questions. So all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And now, Councillor Pachi, you had another motion.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I want to make a further motion, and that would direct staff to prepare for this council a bylaw, trapping bylaw, according to the example that you have in Appendix A, that being the City of Surrey, and to come back to us with such a bylaw, which is subject to ministerial approval. And
Okay.
I so move.
I think Councillor Beswick.
And then I'd like
already
to
has.
speak to it if I get a seconder for that.
It's been seconded. Councillor Beswick, go ahead. Councillor Pachi.
Thank you, Worship. This has sort of come up all of a sudden because of some discoveries that were made in a certain part of Lindley Valley. And so Councillor Bestwick and myself last week met with the Association for the Protection of Fur-Bearing Animals. And we came away pretty well convinced that there are different and many and non-lethal ways of dealing with beavers, that being that live trapping or dealing with water flow management devices that are available to any and all who want it. So to us it seemed the appropriate thing to do. We're also impressed by the fact that the same association offers their services and their knowledge free of charge to either a municipality or a landowner that wishes to deal with this. You know, from my perspective, the use of body gripping devices, be that conibear traps or leg hold traps or snares, are just too cruel a way of dealing with these animals. And so I think it's important that we take this first step. There are other municipalities. There is the township of Gibsons that has a bylaw on the book. Vernon has one. The city of Victoria has one. Surrey has this draft bylaw on the books. And I want to emphasize that there was a UBCM, a Union of BC Municipalities Convention in Vancouver this summer, where a motion was passed to request the applicable ministry to review the whole business of trapping, with particular emphasis on trapping in urban areas. And, I'm cognizant of the fact that whatever bylaw it is that we come up with, that it is subject to ministerial approval, and that's an important thing to know, but I think it can be done, and I think it should be done, and I really do believe that now is the time to get this started. Thank you, Worship.
Okay, we have Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thank you, Councillor Patchy, for bringing this motion up. As many people know, from the last few weeks, we've had emails from individuals speaking about these type of traps, and subsequently it has brought this motion up. And for me, I believe this is starting almost somewhat of a knee-jerk reaction. And it's not that I think that we shouldn't be doing something in regards to this, but we're in the process, well, we've just passed a motion to our staff that say that they will look at this over the 1-year period and see what the environmental and financial implications are. And so if we're able to have that evidence and that ability come 1 year from now, we can make a decision based on evidence instead of just having this knee-jerk reaction. I can understand why Councillor Patchy feels that it is inhumane and so on, but I think that it would be prudent for us to follow the method which we are currently doing, that was set out in the last recommendation, that we look at the environmental factors and the financial factors and then make a decision at that point. So I would be happy to vote for the bylaw that Councillor Patchy is suggesting, but I would like to wait and have the information in front of me before I move forward, so I won't be supporting the motion.
Okay, Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will be supporting Councillor Patchy's recommendations this evening, Your Worship. For me, and my colleagues will all know that I'm very much about pride of place. And I don't know how a citizen of this community can pride themselves on live trapping of beavers or any other animals. In an urban setting, it's not just the wild animal that are at risk. It's children, it's pets, and the developers will argue, well, people may be trespassing on their lands, but people do, and there's those risks, Your Worship. So I absolutely agree that we should do what we can to ban gripping traps in this community.
I was going to say, because you mentioned something about, you meant gripping and snares.
Gripping and snares, yeah.
Okay, so
we've seen pictures of animals chewing their legs.
Live trapping, which is
snares, gripping traps.
Yep. Okay, good point. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Worship. I'll be supporting the motion, and clearly I think society suggests today that body gripping traps are inhumane and heartless, and there is other methods of installing of flow devices. There's other ways to manage the issues caused by beaver, and these body gripping traps also trap wildlife and domestic animals and otherwise that are not intended to be trapped, so to speak. And I think that this is an excellent step for us to take, and one that I think that will prove that if we don't do it now, it'll come back and prove that we should have done it now. So it gets 100% of my support. Thank you.
Okay, for my part, I'll also be supporting it. It is kind of a barbaric practice, and I think we've all seen pictures of animals that have been inadvertently trapped in some of these snares and leg hold traps, and the body gripping ones are probably the nastiest of all. And I don't know, I see pictures of tigers, which thankfully we don't have around here, that have been caught in snares and left for days and sometimes weeks before, and they die a painful death. So I have a problem with that too. Councillor Kipp.
Yeah, I'm not certain I agree with Councillor Anderson. This is knee-jerk. I think I thought this wouldn't be going on in our community right now because it's absolutely cruel. And even for the target animals, it's cruel. And I think there's other methodologies. As we talk about, when you see shows on what the beaver can actually do for an environment and how we do, I mean, if a culvert's getting dammed up, you start to put some flow sticks about 10 feet in front of the culvert, they build it there, and the water runs through the culvert, and they actually create wetlands. So it's not a knee jerk for me. Any animal caught in this might not have a need a jerk at the end of the trapping. I think we got to get on this as fast as possible. I think we probably should have done it before, and I'm glad the public brought this to our attention. Thank you. And I support getting on with it as quick as possible.
Councillor Brandon.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I support this. I fully support this. And I have to say I was so surprised to even know that these body gripping traps were still in use. Because I can remember in the 70s this being a huge issue. And I thought they had been banned. And so when this issue was brought up to us, I was really surprised because when we all know the sort of barbaric nature of these things, I thought they had been done away with. So I'm happy to support this. I mean, what we all recognize from the report is that this is a motion on our part that it will create a bylaw that at this time will be unenforceable. So even if you think we should wait a year to determine the impact, I suppose, of the city's response to not do them, you'll likely have that year. We will all likely have that year because this will not be enforceable. The minister is reviewing now, I guess, the results of some requests from the UBCM to study the issue. So once I think the minister starts, he has the report, and once he starts to see the number of cities, if this starts a kind of a steamrolling kind of response, then the more cities who ask the minister for this authority, the more likely I think we are to get it. So I think it's timely. I don't think that it's, I know it's not going to be immediate. And so I think we have the time to do this. This is virtually a lobbying effort. And at the end of the year, we'll have a report from our staff about how well our work has panned out. So I think it's absolutely appropriate.
Thank you. Councillor Greaves.
Thank you, Worship. Well, I was prepared not to support this recommendation or bylaw, only because we can't legally enforce it. And I don't see any point in passing something that you can't enforce. But after listening to the debate and the discussion, the more cities that get together and push this, the better. I think Councillor Anderson was reading my mind. I was going to say it was a knee-jerk reaction, but I dare not say this because Councillor Kipp would be all over me. So, you know, it has come to top of mind now because of the Lindley Valley situation. So, but I will now support this this bylaw. It is a very barbaric way to trap animals, and it's actually disgusting.
Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I to support it. My question is to staff. What action can the province take against municipalities that create such bylaws? And has there been any correspondence or notice given to any of the communities that have so far passed bylaws, Gibson's being the oldest in 2011?
Your Worship, more of the impact is that if you're issuing and if you're enforcing a bylaw, on an individual who's contravening your bylaw, and it goes to court, the courts would look at whether you have the authority to issue that enforcement action. And of course you wouldn't, so that would never be enforceable in court. That's more of the issue in this point.
Thank you.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for my own clarification and maybe that of others, so it's my understanding we can't enforce no trapping within the city of Nanaimo on private property, but we can enforce through bylaw the method or the methods used for trapping. So can we not prevent body gripping traps from being used? You can trap them, but you can't use body gripping traps. Can we not make that an enforceable bylaw?
Your Worship, that's the essence of the issue that we need compliance from the province on. And Mr. Lindsay, do you have anything further?
Your Worship, I would just add that this issue comes under one of these spheres of concurrent authority where the province, through the Wildlife Act, administers and regulates trapping. The community charter sets out that a municipality may establish a bylaw, but then it goes on to say that if that bylaw further regulates beyond the Wildlife Act, anything beyond the Wildlife Act, that you would need ministerial approval. So any kind of bylaw that regulated the type of trap, or even went as far as to require other additional signage requirements, for example, anything beyond the existing regulations would require ministerial approval.
That doesn't seem to make any sense. If we can't enact a bylaw within our city limits of something that is dangerous to public and or private property, being the trap that's being used, but it's an empty, it doesn't make sense.
It comes down to the order of government in terms of what they have control over, and the building code's another one where you can't issue bylaws that contrary to the provincial regulations. Speed limits on provincial highways, you couldn't go in, even though they go through your highway, and issue different speed limits on those. So there's certain things that there's concurrence in terms of their approval before you can do things.
Okay.
Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. I just, I agree with Councillor Bestwick's thinking. I'm reasonably happy with the direction that the city will not be using trapping of any kind at this point, so that gives me a little bit of reassurance. I need to point out that obviously we're all aware that the city cannot change the act of trapping because that falls under the Wildlife Act and is the jurisdiction of the province. But I think by virtue of, say, the township of Gibsons, who've had a bylaw on the books since 2011, one that has not been challenged in any way, shape, or form that I'm aware of, that there is a way of getting getting something on the books. But in any case, my question to staff is, now that you know that this more than likely is going to be passed, will you have a way of communicating with the appropriate ministry that we have this on the books and that we would like them to speed up?
Yes, Your Worship, we would actually inform the office. We've been in discussions with them. We would let them know that this is being prepared and that it'll be forwarded to them as soon as Council authorizes it.
Okay, thank you.
Just a quick question myself to staff. Mr. Swaby, has our staff been in touch with the staff over in Vancouver, or Surrey specifically, to find out what implications their bylaw has had vis-a-vis the province?
Yes, we have been in discussions with the province about that. We know that Surrey's bylaw is before the province being considered right now.
Okay. So I think we've
Moved and seconded.
Moved and seconded? And so we're all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Now, sorry? Oh, George, you're opposed? Oh, sorry. So Councillor Anderson opposed, Bouncer Councillor in favor. The motion passes. We'll move into unresolved building deficiencies and bylaw contravention notice, and it's respected that council, it is requested that council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to unresolved building deficiencies for the properties listed below. And there are, I don't think any have been withdrawn on it, Ms. King, so we still have 9. And the very first property is 905 Terminal Avenue, illegal dwelling unit, construction of a residential suite in a commercial building. Anyone in attendance tonight that would like to speak to matters related to 905 Terminal Avenue? The next property is 101 McKinnon Place, illegal construction, construction of a deck with a setback and without a building permit. Anyone in attendance would like to speak to matters related to 101 McKinnon Place? The third is 206 Craig Street, illegal construction, construction of a deck, stairs, and railing without a building permit. Anyone in attendance tonight that would like to speak to matters related to 206 Craig Street?
Your Worship and Council, I'm John Huff. I am the husband of the owner of the house, and she has allowed me to live with her for the past 22 years in that house. The slide in front of you is the front view of our house and our front porch prior to our minor repairs to our front porch. The next slide is the picture of the minor repairs and cosmetic changes we did to our front porch. I'd like to point out the sidewalk, cement sidewalk that is now in place there. And I'd also like to point out the fir framing around the window of both the left-hand side and right-hand side. Here's a picture of our front porch prior to our renovations. I'd like council to note the relationship of the chair to the height of the pony wall that's in place. And here's a picture of our front porch after we did our repairs and minor cosmetic changes. Again, noting that the railing now in place instead of the pony wall is higher than the original one. And the last picture is a little bit closer view of our front porch as we finished it, along with the fact that our cat enjoys the renovations we did. We put in a sidewalk to our front porch, which required us to remove our stairs. The stairs were existing, they were rotting, we had to throw them away. At the same time, we decided that we would replace the flooring on our front porch, which was essentially 3 sheets of plywood. In order to take off the flooring, we had to remove the non-load-bearing posts. We just took off the plywood, put a new set of plywood down. In order to put the framing around the house for cosmetic purposes, we took the siding off, put the framing around the window, put the siding back on, and we put a tongue and groove cedar covering over top of the 2x4s. They're minor repairs. We did no structural changes to our house. The City of Nanaimo website says that there is no building permit required when we do minor structural repairs to an existing feature. The evidence provided to the court, to the council, indicates that I don't think that you have enough evidence under section 57.1 of the charter to put anything on our property, because all we did was do a minor cosmetic change to our front porch. It doesn't require a building permit. And if you have any questions,
Okay, sir, I just a question to staff. Is there not a way that we can get this resolved? I understand there wasn't a building permit taken out, but that said, I mean, there must be a way we can move ahead with this in some type of fashion, and I'm putting that question to you.
Well, Your Worship, these are difficult situations where issues don't comply with the code, are removed, and are rebuilt, and they don't comply with the code again. And I'll turn this over to Mr. Lindsay, but I believe we contacted the owner during the construction and asked him to stop so that we could have the permit in place with the proper construction that would comply with the current building code. The challenge we have is now that we know how it was done, that it doesn't comply, the liability then exists forever with whoever owns the house, and that's the citizens of Nanaimo would be liable for anything that would happen. And Mr. Lindsay, do you have anything further?
No, sorry, I was looking down at the time. No is the answer. Okay, Councillor Kipp for the delegation or for?
Well, yeah, it's a delegation. What's underneath the porch? I mean, I have visited the site, so I just like it. What's underneath the porch area?
Dirt.
It's dirt, and the house is actually along the doorway and along the wall where the window is. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Which of the, and only the one corner post is a bearing post?
None of the posts are bearing posts.
None of the posts are bearing. No. The roof overhang hangs there. So, thank you very much. Question to staff, or if anybody else wants to talk to the delegation.
Well, I think it's delegation, is it? Yep. Okay.
I'll ask my staff.
Is it why don't you ask the staff question now, and then we'll come on to Councillor Anderson.
Well, okay.
'Cause there might be more questions for the delegation.
The part on the building code where it says minor structural changes, if they haven't done any structure in that here, is that typical? I mean, they say obviously the porch exists with older pictures. They've changed it, but is that? Yeah. How does that fit in that context of what it says in the building code?
Certainly, Your Worship, and it ultimately comes down to this issue, as the speaker has presented this evening, of what is a repair and what ultimately becomes a structural issue. For us, our building official attended the site. They were in the middle of deconstruction, reconstruction. The opinion of the building official was that there was work of structural nature occurring on the property. The recommendation at that time was to stop work, come in, submit a building permit, and then complete the work with a building permit. Unfortunately, that did not occur, and the end product was finished off, as you see here today, without a building permit. So it puts us in an awkward position, because we could go ahead, as I think the earlier question was, how could this be resolved? It could be resolved through a building permit today, but it makes it difficult for staff to go in and inspect portions of the construction that have now been covered. It would probably require some level of deconstruction before we could issue any permit.
May I speak to that?
Yeah, sure.
I don't want to get into a he said, she said calling match, but the building inspection was this. My wife can attend to it because she was there when it says, we'd already finished everything before the building inspection happened. He came up there, he was very upset that he had walked by about a week earlier, said, come down and talk to me in the office. It was a bit of confusion. He came back on the 14th, everything was done. There was no inspection. He just walked up, slapped the stop work order, which we've complied with. We have not done anything to our front porch since June 14th.
But you said it's finished, though.
Yeah, it was finished before the stop work order was even put on it.
So you wouldn't have any more work to do after June 14th
No.
anyway, so. Okay, Councillor Anderson, did you pull on yours? Or you want to go? Okay, sure. Councillor Kipp, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, you'd have to complete a handrail down the stairs.
We will if they want, but we can't because there's a stop work order on it.
It's just under the 206 sign there.
Yeah.
A question for the staff. 22 inches above grade, no handrail required.
24, yes.
24, yeah, so which the deck is almost up, but the problem with the rail that's short is it's a trip hazard. Somebody could trip over it, and that's the concern of it. So this is one, it's a tough one for me because it was there, it existed, and they fixed it. And it's a tough one. I think the building inspector, I don't know how they found out or was there a complaint or anything, but these are tough ones because the people went ahead and did their work and that. And for me, I can't support these type of ones. I understand if someone's putting a suite in, constructing a whole deck new to their house and that, but these type of ones concern me, especially with the language we have on our website. It says small minor construction doesn't require a permit. So I can't support the issue, this one.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Worship. Just a question to staff. This reno, from your observation, does it or does it not comply to the building code?
It does not.
And what parts of it, from your observation, without doing the inspection, that you can visually see don't comply?
The two obvious things are the handrail and the stairs and the guard around the deck. The guard has to be 36 inches high, and I don't believe it is from looking at it visually.
So just out of curiosity, any deck in the city of Nanaimo that does not have a 36-inch railing on it doesn't comply if that work has been performed since a person purchased the home?
That's the whole issue here, is that if a deck, or in this case a railing, is removed, it has to be constructed to the new code, and hence the need for a building permit to construct to the new code. We've had many examples like this before council in which people have entirely taken off their railing and rebuilt their decks, and then they don't rebuild their railings to the current code, and we raise the issue. Again, it comes back to, and I'm sure the owner would have built it to the code if it was identified to them through the building permit process, but as he noted, the inspector came by a week in advance, asked for to come into the office. As you noted, that unfortunately there's some miscommunication there, I think was your wording, and if that happened, then it would have all got built to code. Now we have a product that's not built to code, and as Mr. Swaby said, is how do we leave that, either with a notice on title, or if your decision is without a notice on title, there's some liability attached to that.
And your worship, of course, the risk in this case, of course, is different than if this was 20 stories up in an apartment building, which there's many with the same situation. However, the risk going forward is that if council authorizes this to remain without complying with the code, that risk remains always if a homeowner has an accident and wants to take action against the city for approving it. And as small as it seems, those are the issues we try and protect the taxpayers with, and we try and apply the rules consistently across the board.
Your worship, may I speak to that?
Yeah. Okay.
If we were allowed to, we can put up the railings, and it takes 4 screws to move it up the 1.5 inches that it's short. So we have no problem of complying without that, of doing that. So as I said, but we can't. We're not allowed to.
Understood. Okay, Councillor Greaves.
Thank you, Worship. I don't know if this is relevant or not, but what would be the approximate cost of a building permit for this?
About 1% of the construction value. So if it's $1,000 construction, we have a minimum fee of
$105 minimum.
Thank you.
Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think Mr. Huff answered my question. I was going to suggest that, or ask staff why Mr. Huff couldn't just put a 2x4 board on, nail it on the top, and that would make the difference between being legal or not.
Oh, that would look nice.
Well, no, paint it white. It would, but if he only has to remove a few screws and readjust it.
The problem with, you can't just move it up because there's a clearance factor underneath the railings as well. So
the addition of a board on top would do the trick.
If that brought it up to 36 inches. Again, the whole process here is we're here for an education source in the building inspection department. People come in and ask what the code regulation is. And as I said, I'm sure the applicant would have built it that way. Mm-hmm. But what we attempt to do is go and have voluntary compliance. The inspector describes how it should be built through a building permit, and it's built right the first time. And looking at the construction, as I think we all see, it looks like it's well built. It just doesn't comply to code.
Are you done?
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Brennan.
I heard the applicants say that they were willing to make some changes. They feel.
Councillor Greaves, thank you.
They feel constrained from making changes because there's the stop work order. It's as a result of some miscommunication and not a clear instruction, I guess, from the city to not just wander down to the office, but the instruction should probably have been more clear than that. So as a result, we have this. But I would move that we give the homeowner 30 days. Is that enough time for you to talk to the staff and make changes as necessary?
Sure.
And move that we send this back to staff for 30 days in order to have the homeowner and the city discuss how it might be remedied.
Okay, maybe just before it's seconded, we just make sure that staff feel this is... Mr. Swaby?
Your worship, that's reasonable.
Sorry?
That's reasonable.
Okay. So, moved and seconded then. And no further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. 30 days, sir. And if you could get a hold of the people as early as possible to get a start on it?
They're there right now. I'll email them.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move into item 4, which is 420 McKay Street, illegal construction of a deck without a building permit. Is there anyone in attendance who'd like to speak to matters related to 420 McKay Street? It's not your street, is it? Seeing none, we'll move into 672 Hawkins Street, illegal secondary suite construction of a secondary suite without a building permit. Anyone in attendance tonight that'd like to speak to matters related to 672 Hawkins Street? The next is 440 Aysgarth Street. That's in Departure Bay, I believe, is it not? Illegal secondary suite, construction of a secondary suite without a building permit. Is there anyone in attendance who would like to speak to matters related to that address? Argyle? No, it's not Argyle. Oh, okay. The next one is 406 Millstone Avenue, illegal construction of a covered entry without a building permit. Anyone in attendance wants to speak to matters related to 406 Millstone Avenue. 730 Brecken Road, illegal secondary suite, construction of a secondary suite without a building permit. Anyone in attendance would like to speak to matters related to 730 Brecken Road. And finally, 339 View Street, illegal secondary suite, construction of a secondary suite without a building permit. Anyone in attendance that'd like to speak to matters related to 339 View Street? Seeing none, and with the exception of 3, which I think we will withdraw.
File a bylaw contravention notice respecting the properties listed below, excluding number 3, at the Land, Title, and Survey Authority of British Columbia under Section 57 of the Community Charter.
There's a seconder? Anyone? Second? Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Corporate services, none. Community services, none. Bylaws with no accompanying report. We have a delegation for Mr. Ron Boland. Mr. Boland?
Ron Boland, 3165 King Richard Drive. In light of the fact that I have been reminded that this, by provincial legislation, this must go forward by Thursday, and there being no time for discussion, as you will have no subsequent meetings, I would merely like to reflect on the fact that I hope your budgeting process this year will get through matters like this, rather than another case of applying the 2014 budget before we even get to the budgeting process. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you, sir. Good point. So the and the next one, well, actually, we could go into 11A. There's a motion before us. If someone would like to make that motion.
So moved, Your Worship.
Okay, and the motion that the property tax exemption bylaw 2013-7177 to exempt certain lands and billing some taxation 2014 be adopted. Is there a seconder? You seconded? Who seconded? You did? Okay. For discussion, Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think Mr. Boland, delegation, makes a very valid point as it relates to this before us, with 3 days prior to it being registered. There's 42 properties identified, and year over year the amounts are significant, and I'm certain that the recipients are very worthy, no doubt about it. My question to staff is, do we have discretion on the amount and or percentage of permissive tax exemption that we permit or that we exempt?
As Mr. Clemens comes forward, the short answer is yes, and I'll let him explain further. By policy, council can set how you deal with this.
Thank you. Mr. Clemens.
Yes, Your Worship, there actually is quite a short answer. That we do have discretion, and council, their permissive tax exemptions are exactly that. They're permissive. The council can make decisions and set policy as to what levels of exemption they wish to provide. And one of the things council may want to consider as we go into a review of the permissive tax exemption rule is whether council wants to provide sort of additional direction to the Grants Advisory Committee, who will be making recommendations in early next year on the properties that are currently on the roll.
Thank you, and just to follow up, so we have 42 properties that we're voting on tonight. Is this all of the properties for the 2014, I assume, permissive tax exemption application?
I don't remember the exact number, but there are more. I believe there are more properties on the roll than that. I thought there was about 140 properties on the permissive tax exemption roll.
I think they approved.
Then I wonder, out loud, if I may, they're not included in Schedule A. Is there more? Is there a schedule with the balance that I'm missing? And just to follow up to that, do we have the total in terms of dollars for the entire permissive tax exemptions that we're approving or not approving tonight?
I believe there's multiple schedules to the report. The information that Councillor Beswick's asking for was included in the report that went to Council last week, so if you can give me a few minutes, I'll look that up at the last meeting and we can provide it to you.
Okay. Sorry, I'm seeing there's schedules A's, B's, C's, and D's, and some are churches and some are commercial properties and some are otherwise.
Yeah, the schedules, Your Worship, are divided up into categories based on the kind of applications that they were.
So, so my thought is that for the, do we review independent of one another the individual applications, or is it just simply a status quo year over year? Is it my understanding that every 4 years or 3 years we do an independent review of each applicant?
Your Worship, the process is every new application gets reviewed by the Grants Advisory Committee, and the Grants Advisory Committee makes recommendations to Council on whether or not to add those organizations to the committee. Every year, there is a technical review done by staff just to make sure that those organizations still meet the technical and legal requirements to be exempted permissively. And then every 3 years, the Grants Advisory Committee reviews every property that's on the permissive tax exemption roll and makes a recommendation to Council on whether or not to remove any of those organizations.
And ultimately, Council, of course, it's up to Council to approve or not approve any of them.
Thank you. So, although it appears to be too late, given the time constraints, to reduce or retain the amounts that are exempted, I would like to provide further direction then to the Grants Advisory Committee to take into consideration a lesser permissive tax exemption.
So, Your Worship, I have the answer to Councillor Beswick's earlier questions. After these organizations are added, there would be 115 organizations representing 156 different individual properties, and the value of that exemption on the city portion of taxes is about $1.4 million.
Okay.
Thank you. So I'd just be seeking staff's direction on how to go about, and maybe this would come in the form of a notice of motion, giving us more time to craft such a motion.
Just for clarity again, Mr. Glanz, we have really just a very few days left in this particular window to complete the documentation and pass it.
That's correct, Your Worship. Every year, the permissive tax exemption bylaw must be approved by October 31st. That's required so that BC Assessment has the information in time in order to prepare the property tax rolls, which they have done by December 31st of each year.
Thank you. Councillor Kipp.
Yeah, with that, I'd like to see, like, give them a 90% reduction. We save 10%, 140,000 would be nice. What do we have with the ability, like, to adjust the size of the footprints that they use? Most of that is set. The provincial government or sets that they can only be certain size exemptions and that.
So, Your Worship, certain properties are exempt statutorily. For example, a church building and the land immediately below that building are exempt by statute. Council has no discretion over whether or not that property gets exempted. But Council does have some...
Exemption?
Excuse me?
Mandatory 100% exemption, or we can adjust it?
No, 100% of the church building and the land immediately below the church we refer to as the footprint. Any land beyond that is permissive. Council has the ability to exempt land beyond that footprint. Council's policy right now is that we will automatically exempt up to 2 acres of land surrounding any church as long as it's part of a single parcel. That could be amended if Council wanted to make some changes to that. Generally speaking, on most properties that are permissive, so a nonprofit organization, for example, that owns its own building, Council can choose to provide any level of exemption to that property. Right now, generally speaking, those properties are completely exempted. In most cases where there is some commercial use of the property, if, for example, if they've leased out a portion of it, then that will not be exempted. And that's why you have these diagrams attached to your bylaws that shows that those pieces of property have some portions that Council has decided not to exempt. Council has regularly and consistently not exempted property that's being used as a bar, for example, as part of the use of the property. So there are a number of different rules, but Council right now has, generally speaking, where an organization is usually either on or off, other than those exceptions.
Okay. Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, Mr. Clemens has clarified, hopefully for Council, a lot of the concerns they have. But churches are 100% assessed by the province as permissive tax exempted. Most of the other properties are either city-owned buildings or not-for-profit societies, which provide a great community service and provide quality of life to the citizens of our community. And if I could remind Council that all of the exempted properties this year have come before this Council for ratification, where no changes were made, and that's why they have been presented tonight. And in fact, some that we decided not to exempt, Council had reversed and wanted to be exempted. So the committee's a very hard-working committee, and I'm sure nobody disputes that, but certainly I would welcome any member of Council to sit in on the Grants Advisory Committee meetings and add input to the discussions if they think that they have more to offer the discussion. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just wanted to reiterate what Councillor Johnstone had said, that when it comes to permissive tax exemptions, we just did this one a few weeks ago in regards to Malaspina Radio, and we had exempted a certain portion of it. So Council does have that ability to do so, and I can tell you from being a member of the Grants Advisory Committee that this is something that we consistently look at, especially when there's commercial aspects of building that are applied, and we did this again with the squash club. So these are things that Council consistently does on a regular basis, where we allow a tax exemption on a certain portion and look past the parts that are commercial. Don't look past the parts that are commercially. So just hopefully that clarifies some portion of the dialogue that's going on for Council.
Okay, Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. I think that if the Grants and Aid Committee is going to be asked to consider percentages, that Council itself will have to adopt some sort of policy on that, because it's going to be a very difficult task to determine, I mean, the square footage, and they already do that, you know, what's not being used for, you know, a nonprofit purpose. So they already do that. So the only other arithmetic they'd have to do would be based on the value of the service. And I think that the Grants and Aid Committee would want some direction from council as to what council decides or thinks is a valuable service being offered to our community. And the Grants and Aid Committee would be, I think, correct to say, well, if you want us to determine the relative value of, say, the Women's Center, or the United Way, or the Child Development Center, then you're going to have to give us some direction. And so if we're going to make those kinds of requests of committees, then we need to be able to take the, you know, the steering wheel and give that kind of direction. I suspect it will be exceptionally difficult.
Okay, Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. To staff, if I may, on the grid that we have on the staff report with the churches, how many of those, and referring to the rule of exempting up to 2 acres, how many of these are more than 2-acre properties, roughly?
I'm not sure I'm 100% going to get this off the top of my head, but I think there's only a couple of churches that have more than 2 acres of the land.
And then that rule of exemption, does that square with how other municipalities do it, basically?
On my experience, I would say that in most municipalities, it's all or nothing. And so most municipalities exempt, I think, all the land surrounding a church.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Johnston.
Just quickly, Your Worship, what this council may wish to do is review the criteria that has been set down for council's consideration every year. During the past 3 years, we reviewed the criteria for other municipalities of comparable size, and our criteria is very, very similar to other municipalities, but that may be an option. That may be at some workshop or meeting we could have a look at the criteria and ask for council's input, but it's been very thoroughly looked at, reviewed.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think we don't really have too many options at this stage. I think we're pretty well obliged to pass the motion because it has to be done by the 31st of October, which is only 2 or 3 days away now. So we'll have Councillor Kipp next.
Thank you. It's interesting that Councillor Johnson brings up what the actual criteria is. Has that been brought in line with our strategic plan in the last years, for example? Is that line up with the 4 pillars of our community? Have we brought those standards in? How do we quantify? There's a number of economic strategies to quantify quality of life. You can use economic, you know, the cost of livings, the time offs, and all those. So, is our criteria for these, are they tied to our strategic plan in any way?
I would say they are. If I was looking at the criteria at this point in time, I would say they very much match our strategic plan.
That's good to hear.
Okay, Councillor Bestway.
Thank you, Worship. I just want for my colleagues to know that are on this committee that I totally appreciate and respect the amount of time and efforts and energies that go into it. This is not about the work and the effort and the education that the people that are conducting this do. It's not that at all. And I accept the words of our chair, I believe, Councillor Johnson, on the fact that it's if we want to do anything to review the policies or otherwise surrounding it. So as we're moving forward through our budget deliberations, through all of these things that we do, grant applications, sport and tourism grant all of these things that we do, I think it's absolutely important and imperative, and we're going down such I think a very positive path with how we're doing our budget preparations for 2014 and beyond. And simply that is why I just don't want this item or any items to be overlooked. And here we are, it's October, and we're talking about committing monies for 2014, and maybe there's some that we could speed up in 2014 for 2015. That's really the genesis of the premise of my questions and requests. So I appreciate your responses and your work that you perform on this task. Thank you.
Okay, no further questions. So question on the motion, all those on the motions, there's A and B. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And
Bylaw 2013, number 6500.022 OCP 68, to include the Harewood Neighborhood Plan within the official community plan be adopted.
Okay, and there was a second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And C?
Mr. Chair, I believe I may have made a mistake. Did I?
Your
Well, I
Worship.
thought A and B were done, but
Your Worship, the motion was on the floor previous to Councillor Anderson's motion for the property tax exemption for adoption of that bylaw, which would be A only.
okay.
And then Councillor Anderson made the motion, which was subsequently
Seconded.
adopted
And it was
with
voted
respect
on.
to bylaw 6500.022. So we are now on C.
On C.
Yes.
You're going to have a bash at that one, Councillor Anderson?
I'd move that official community plan amendment bylaw 2013 number 6500.023 OCP 76 to include an amended regional context statement within the official community plan bylaw 6500 be adopted.
Seconded. No discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Now, on the next one, yes, Councillor Brennan is going to absent herself on a perceived conflict of interest, in that her spouse is an employee of the School District 68 as a trustee. So if somebody would like to move, there's two motions.
That official community plan amendment bylaw 2013 number 6500.021 OCP 75 to redesignate lands in support of the School District 68/City of Nanaimo land exchange project be adopted.
Seconder? Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
And that zoning amendment bylaw 2013 number 4500.045 RA 317 to rezone 5101 Rutherford Road from R1 to R2 and PRC 1 and 502 Howard Avenue from...
Excuse me,
You're
Your
just a
Worship.
little bit early.
Councillor Brennan needs to be out of the room for this one as well.
And 502 Howard Avenue from CS1 to PRC3, a portion of 445 Comox Road from PRC3 to CS1, and 6780 Dickinson Road from R1 to PRC1 be adopted.
Moved and seconded. And I see no discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. We can now recover. Okay, and there's no correspondence, so actually we go into other business, 15A. And Councillor Brennan, you can... we're on 15A, other business. At the regular meeting of council held 2013, October 7, Councillor McKay advised he would be bringing forward the following motion to the 2013, October 28th meeting, which is right today. Regular meeting of council. Did you want to read that one? Or
I certainly do.
Please, carry on.
Thank you. That council request that staff investigate alternate LED signage opportunities for Bevan Park, including examples from other cities, and report back to council with options prior to tendering the Bevan Park LED sign. And
Move and second. Discussion, go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
No, this is a motion. You gave us the notice last week.
There are other communities in Vancouver and on Vancouver Island that have gone to a different approach to signage around the community, including around facilities such as this. Langford, for example, in some of their facilities, they have a self-administered program where they build LED signage and then create opportunities for third-party and community advertising on them. The other one is in Surrey and in Abbotsford, where they've gone to outside contractors who are bundling inventory, including in front of civic facilities and gateway signage, highway signage, that sort of thing. And some of them have found that extremely rewarding. In addition to which, they have no responsibility for the signage. They have, the only thing they have to do is put the permits in place, and an outside contractor such as Pattison Outdoor will actually erect the signage, manage the signage, maintain the signage, and not unlike what you see on bus advertising or bus bench advertising, they basically provide a monthly or a quarterly payment to the municipality for the privilege of being able to do so. The beauty of it is that we tend to find ourselves in a situation when we purchase is A, we've got the capital costs to deal with, but also the management of those pieces of equipment. And what we tend to do is we always look off the bottom right-hand corner of the tenders, and we don't always find ourselves making good value decisions, where we might purchase product that won't last as long, might be troublesome. When you get into some of these third-party situations where you've got outside contractors being involved with them, they look after all that. You don't have to worry about anything. You just wait for the post to come in with your check in the mail. Plus, they provide significant opportunities, if worded properly, for community advertising on board these signs. So Mr. Harding and I have had long discussions about this. I'm wanting to see if there's an appetite on council to at least explore this. There's people out there that are ready, willing, and able to give him all the information he requires to come back to council prior to this project going ahead, and hopefully that can be done in a fairly short period of time, and hopefully we could avoid the capital cost of this project, and with a different option.
Okay, several questions. Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor McKay, if I may. Do you have examples of revenue opportunities, and is the revenue portion between the commercial holder of the sign and the city or the municipality? Is there an opportunity for revenue making for ourselves?
Absolutely, that's exactly what it's all about. Is that there are, in many cases, the privately operated units, such as what you see down in Langford, they manage that through employees, I believe, within Parks and Rec or one of their departments. They sell the advertising on there. It's third party. There's community announcements, those sorts of things, as well as recreational announcements. They manage that internally. The external ones. There's the same sort of program, with the exception that there's third-party advertising on them. And yes, they're big revenue generators for the community, with no responsibility for their maintenance or upkeep or anything, managing nothing.
Okay, pardon me, Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. Either to Councillor McKay or to staff, but are we just dealing with one sign here, or is this the beginning of getting us on a complete LED signage review, which I know some of you want?
Proposed to, this is directed just at the one sign, and it would be up to council in the future whether you wanted to expand that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess I support exploring this. It makes sense to do that. But when staff is exploring it, it's one of those arm's length relationships, and so I'd want some pretty strict kind of guidelines in place about the community advertising. I'm assuming we don't charge any community organizations to put things up on the Bevan Park sign, or do we? We do?
We do not.
Oh, we do not. Okay. So I'd like to preserve that. I'd like to see I'd like the report to address the question of how to preserve the same percentage that we have for community announcements on that sign. I'd like the staff to address the issue of contracting out a service that we currently have and use specific reference to the contracting out report that we had, so we're not, you know, just sort of getting reports and then not using them to help us make other decisions. So I'd also, I guess, think that the report should advise us how much the private company makes, and then compare and contrast that to what the company would be paying us, so we can see that it's a reasonable deal where everybody, you know, comes out with the same sort of advantages. So those are the kinds of things I'd like to have paid attention to in a report, and if those things are in the report, I'll be happy with the report.
Okay, so the motion has been moved and seconded. I see no further discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So we go down to number 16, question period. Don't break it, that's city equipment.
Dented.
My name is Fred Taylor, and your conversation in regards to Mon Road, I believe BC Assessment Authority is charged with looking at the use, the sale price of the property, and a few other factors in helping to determine an assessment. I'm wondering if staff have investigated some of the existing rural operations in the way of assessment, one a couple of blocks away from here, and one on Holden Corso Road, a very large one, to see how Assessment Authority has handled those. The other puzzling thing here is they want, I think it was I-4, and I-4 properties on Mon Road have been given licenses to store contaminated dirt from Victoria. What kind of taxation does that generate? Why would we even have storage in the I-4 category if it permits a business license to store contaminated dirt? How do they assess a pile of contaminated dirt in reference to how you're talking about what kind of business goes into I-4? Doesn't make sense to me. And I think that there's a business proposed to you tonight that's got many jobs more than just a pile of dirt. So I don't understand things. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Ron Boland, 3165 King Richard Road Drive. I have a question, procedural question about the exemption bylaw you passed tonight. I could not find a relation between the properties listed and owners and the amount of exemption that was being given for each in the bylaw. Is that not part of the bylaw?
Is Mr. Clements not available? Maybe he's gone.
The only document I've been able to find that talked about the values for 2014, 15, and 16 was a one-pager in the newspaper in about 5-point print that I'm surprised if anybody could see, but it did have those values in there. But any other document I've seen does not contain that, and either the original motion that you gave the first few readings to or tonight.
Any comment, Mrs. Swaby?
I guess my understanding is there's no assessment yet from 2014, so it wouldn't be filled in yet.
I'm sorry,
There's no assessment as of yet for 2014.
well, you gave away any exemptions specifically. Did that not happen tonight? Sorry, Mayor. I
Yes,
keep
but there's
forgetting
no
to speak.
assessment as of yet for the property for 2014.
Okay, but you passed, what were those figures in the paper that were given and passed? Were given anyway in the paper? I mean, they're estimates, I recognize that, 2014 isn't here, but I assume that those
But I think they're-
organizations
Yeah,
expect.
subject to taxation.
Okay, that those organizations expect and will count on those figures for the next few years.
Mr. Clements, are you up to speed on this?
I think so, Your Worship. The bylaw the council approved tonight was a bylaw to exempt property, so the bylaw then must contain the description of the property that's being exempted. As the city manager pointed out, we can't tell you how much taxes that will be because we haven't set tax rates for 2014. But council has basically approved that those properties will be exempt from taxes when they're established. And we're annually required to report in the newspapers an estimate of what the value of that exemption is over a period of time. So we do, at that time, we do an estimate based on basically what our estimate of the property taxes might be in the future years.
So that would be the prudent information the council would have available to it to look at these situations. Okay.
Sorry, Your Worship, that information was contained in total in the report that went to council on October the 7th, I believe, that I was reading from earlier tonight.
Okay, I'll check. I must have missed it because when I looked there, all I saw were everything but the estimated values. Okay, I'm interested in this because I'm trying to understand the total amount of exemptions that are granted, gifts, grants, and exemptions that are granted first by council and also by the province that equally does this. I'm wondering if there is a known figure for the exemption for churches that is handled by the province, which is basically, as was pointed out, the building itself and the ground immediately beneath it. Do we know the value of that exemption? The reason I raise this is because expenses don't go down with exemptions. They remain the same, and if the people who are involved don't pay them, somebody else does have to pay them, and we have a lot of people in this town who really are struggling and can't afford to pay what can be a very sizable sum for some of these things. So do we know what the figure is that is exempted by the provincial regulation for churches?
Certainly get that for Mr. Boland tomorrow.
I'd appreciate it very much.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, but I forgot one quick question, and that is if storage of dirt or this type of operation discovered tonight or discussed tonight, could the amount of a business license in an I-4, for example, reflect the loss in taxation?
Your Worship, that's a good
So in
point.
other
We'll
words,
have a look
if-
at that tomorrow.
Pardon me?
I don't know the answer to that. We can look at that as
In other words, if you were losing $1,000 because of the reduced taxation, could the business license be $1,000?
Maybe we can get back on that when
Or
you're saying
in the
tomorrow.
I-4?
Not without amendments to the bylaw, but I don't even
Well,
know
right.
if it's possible.
Well, that's part of the job.
We will look at that and get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
One short, quick one. Jim Taylor in Nanaimo. Do we now not allow the use of live traps if you wanted to relocate beaver in the city of Nanaimo?
Yes, Your Worship, we do.
Sorry. Just so that if I read this bylaw right, it says to direct that trapping is not used in the city to manage beavers. So would that mean live traps can't be used to manage beavers if you want to relocate them?
Your Worship, the motion for the city is not to trap at all, which was passed.
So a follow-up, if you wanted to relocate the beaver, would you herd them or?
Your Worship, the consequences of that motion is that the beaver would remain and we'd take other means to deal with the impacts on the stormwater issues that the beavers cause.
Thank you.
Okay. Second, we stand adjourned. Thank you.